All right, everybody. Welcome back to Seaside Joe. That's me, even though my name isn't Joe. And I am Kenneth Arthur, and this is a irregular podcast during the off season. We did this few weeks ago, and with me again, Terrence Robinson, aka Thad Wenatchee, aka at Thad is Rad on Twitter. You can see his work on Field Goals. You can see him on Twitter. And Terrence, we're back here again. I don't like doing. There's his thing. There's an oversaturation of content out there, and I don't need to contribute to it. And I got an email or several messages like, "Oh, what's up with the podcast, that and the other thing." And I appreciate that anyone who would ever want to hear what I have to say. I don't know what there is to say. It's kind of my complaint. Also, is like that there's a manufacturing of fake news or news that's not really news. They're just regurgitating things that have been said over and over and over again about, Baker Mayfield. It's really unfortunate that the Seahawks can't convince people that Drew Lock and Geno Smith are in a competition right now. And I can't sit here and tell anyone what Pete Carroll is actually thinking. Maybe there is, this competition this intention to add somebody else to the mix should they be released or whatever. But it's unfortunate that we can't move past this ever since the Russell Wilson trade and just be like, that's why I liked Drew Lock in the trade so much, because it was like, great, you don't have to go get another prospect like a Drew Lock to add into this eventually. You've got a very cheap $1 million quarterback who's got a little bit of upside, and you could say like, great, we've got a veteran and a guy a little upside. But I don't like putting out a podcast every week because, today we're going to talk about the offense and defense, a little bit of a check-in and all that kind of stuff. But what are people doing out there putting out more and more? There's months between nothing happening and you're just putting stuff out there. Usually it's because you want to, I think people, they just believe that's what podcasts are. They're every week, all year long, or they're 5 days a week, all year long. B, they're addicted to the views. They want to increase the views, and it feels good to have people watching your things or whatever. And C, they've got advertisers, and that's the most important thing to a lot of people. Is just like, oh, I don't really have anything to say today. But I want to make $50. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make something up. So I'm not out here to make $50. I do like people watching the work or listening to the work or whatever. But I don't want to give you just noise in a world of oversaturation where there's 150 new episodes of 150 new podcasts every single day. So that's my Seaside Joe here all the time pitch. But Thad, it's been a few weeks. I mean, are you starving for? I mean, obviously we're all starving for real content, but it's just that's like asking for the first game. We all know we have to wait till week 1 for the game, yeah. So we're all starving for that. But I can't force feed people a bunch of nonsense.
No, and as far as the differentiation, I think with these podcasts, I really like the Man-to-Man podcast. I like the Seattle Overload podcast. And one of the things, and of course the Field Goals podcast, the Seahawkers, one of the things that they do really well is that they space out their information, so they check in with people throughout the off season and they check in on different aspects of maybe like you said in your newsletter and you said before, there's plenty to talk about. There's plenty of interesting things to dive into, but it's not about are we really going to keep talking about whether or not Baker Mayfield's going to show up? I mean, I think did you see that picture of him did we talk about it last time where he had that picture at the,
I don't know if we talked about it, but yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So maybe he came through and just had some informal meeting with the Seahawks, but beyond that, that's not anything. It's like you said, you can either be a podcaster who is there to incite every day. Okay, I'm going to say something, that's, like not controversial, but to incite
Yeah.
something or to rile people up or something. Or you can do something like some of our colleagues and peers do, which is to take a very measured approach, dissecting some of these things, like what's the new 3-4 going to look like?
Yeah.
How is Jamal Adams going to be utilized properly? Diggs, how is that going to work? How is he going to work in there? What's that going to look like for the next 3 or 4 years?
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things. Like, should we have signed Brian Monet? What does that look like for the interior of our defensive line? To me, those are way more exciting, but like you say, it's also way less interesting. I mean, I have some friends out here in Dallas who, they love talking with me about the Seahawks, and we're usually at a bar and I'm not drinking as much as them, but for some reason, I have these friends that think I'm a daily beat reporter for the Seahawks, but I've tried to explain to them what I do at field goals, and they're like, it just doesn't click. Like, oh, you just put together the articles, blah, blah, blah. But to them, they're like constantly questioning me, and they're just so excited. They're like, they either want Mayfield or just to be excited,
Yeah. That's like and I get it, it's like if I talk to somebody outside of what I do or what you do, or people like that aren't following the Seahawks or whatever, it's always the questions of like, are you going to get Mayfield? Do you want Mayfield? Is it good? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's such a strange connection to make because, it's like, I get it. You believe that Baker Mayfield is a top 20 starting quarterback in the NFL. Fine. That's fine. I disagree, but it doesn't really matter. Like, you think that's fine. And you see the Seahawks and you go like, well, none of those guys should be starting for an NFL team. And I also agree with that. If you're in a position to win the Super Bowl, but the Seahawks aren't in that position to win a Super Bowl with Drew Lock or Baker Mayfield or Matt Ryan or even Deshaun Watson, if he wasn't suspended, like, they aren't in that position. And we'll talk about that today, about the offense and the defense, about that picture. It's like, no following anybody's girlfriend or wife. Don't look at their Instagram or Twitter. That's my policy. How about leave people, families out of this? It's creepy. It's you trying to, get your own fame off of, try like anything at all to like get a little bit bigger. I think it's a bridge too far to start investigating people's families to find out if they're in Washington. And even if they were in Washington, Seattle's a beautiful place. My girlfriend wants to go there all the time. It's like, it's a beautiful place. Leave them alone. It's like if Baker Mayfield wants to say something, he went on a podcast and he said a few things, but it's like, to me, it's like, this is too much because the Seahawks don't have a quality starting quarterback. We're going to start investigating the people's lives who you want to be or you think might be because you want to be the scoop. You want to get the scoop. I'm sorry. Like there's better ways to go about this journalism thing than trying to, get on the ground floor like you're, Restrepoing the Seahawks. Leave this out of it. Like, to me, like that is how far people are going during the doldrums of the offseason now to like create news or incite news or get a viral tweet going. It's too much. And it's like, worry about Geno Smith and Drew Lock and Brian Monet. They're on the team. It's like, talk about Jamal Adams or Woolen or Kobe Bryant or, Jordan Brooks. It's like, this is insane. What if the Seahawks hadn't acquired Drew Lock in the trade and it was like Geno Smith and Jacob Eason? Okay, then at that point, we would be sitting here like, there's going to be something could happen, right? And then let's say the Seahawks acquired Drew Lock in June, then we would go like, oh, that's the move, I guess. I guess we're here now and that's the move. Well, that is the move. They did it already. It's like, here's the thing. The Browns have no recourse or reason for making a trade without getting everything that they want out of the trade. It's like they will not, they have to pay Baker Mayfield $18 million unless a team is willing to take on a portion of that salary. They have to do that. They're not going to say, well, I'm feeling antsy because it's June 23rd, so I'm going to now give up anything in this deal, because the only people feeling antsy are Seahawks fans and Browns fans and people that are following Baker Mayfield's situation and Panthers fans or whatever. Everybody's antsy because they're just like, oh, can we have the news, please? And it's like the Browns don't care. The thing that's been reported since the Browns acquired Deshaun Watson is that they're going to be patient. They're going to be patient because they have nothing to lose or nothing to gain, you know? So it's like, if they will wait until that situation arises in which maybe a team like the Seahawks or the Panthers or whatever goes, okay, we'll pay $12 million of his salary or whatever because we just will or whatever. And then they go, great, you know, we don't, you know, I still just don't understand. Like, there's no antsiness, there's no anxiousness. I write a Seahawks newsletter every day. Sometimes I write 2, sometimes I write 3. I don't talk about Russell Wilson. I don't talk about Baker Mayfield. I talk about players on the Seahawks. It's not that hard to do. There's 90 of them. There's coaches. There's front office. There's, you know, a potential sale in a couple of years or whatever. There's so many other things that you can talk about without fabricating some fantasy world for this quarterback who's not even that good. So, you know, and I don't want to make this about Baker Mayfield's like potential quality or whatever, but this is not the guy to freak out about. And the Seahawks are not in a position to support him. Did you read PFF? They have the worst offensive line maybe in the NFL. I don't like everything that PFF does. Their Twitter accounts are out of control. They need to be banned from Twitter. I believe in free speech, except for PFF. Get them off of Twitter. Get them out of here. We don't need that shit anymore. You know, I don't like their grades. I don't believe them. I think that they're completely fabricated, a lot of them. And that's just my belief. Don't sue me. But like, that's my belief. But they're not wrong. The offensive line stinks. You want to put someone back. Baker Mayfield had the best offensive line in the NFL. So, you know, what are we really talking about here? The Seahawks are in great position next year. What is so hard about also this concept of like waiting it out a year? I know that a lot of Seaside Joe fans are on board with that. So it's okay. Like, you know, but it's like we got a little less than 5 weeks until training camp starts. I don't think that the stories will stop that are in those situations, because most people are still retweeting anything about Baker Mayfield and everything. So we got 5 more weeks to go, Thad.
Yeah, and I think as well as a journalist, or as like you said in your article, like where are the journalists? Like, these cats aren't necessarily doing journalism. But if you're a journalist, you're eschewing your responsibilities by retweeting these like mild rumors or fabricated rumors. You're not touching on the larger subject, which is, first off, the Browns aren't going to let Mayfield go for many reasons, but probably the number one reason is they have no idea if Watson's going to be suspended for the whole year or not. And it seems like the negotiations between the NFL and the Players Association, a lot of it hinges on whether or not Watson can get in trouble again, because the reality is that he might get suspended for these first 24 civil suits, and then he has 2 more coming relatively soon, and then there's another 30 to 40 women that might possibly sue him as well. So I think part of the negotiation is whether or not this suspension or will be the only thing, you know what I mean, like double jeopardy style. Can he be charged twice for the same crime, in essence? So I think if you're the Browns, we're, like you said, there's all these things like, hey, you know what, Mayfield's he is a decent enough quarterback where you can be patient. But also, the Browns have no clue if he's going to even play at all, be able to play next year. And then on top of that, I think that people like our, you know, the Bill Barnwell thing that we talked about last week. How do we have the worst offseason when the Browns have, you know, now they have 4 quarterbacks on their roster, and one of them has, you know, the largest guaranteed salary in the NFL history. So why would any team, even if you're just looking at it from like a cynical standpoint, why would any NFL team bail out the Browns? Why would they bail them out? They screwed up. You know, they're not gonna bail them out. So I think if you are a journalist your position, your responsibility in a lot of ways is not to necessarily talk about all the things that Watson did, but to talk about the things surrounding it, which to me is a more heady conversation and it's a more nuanced conversation, and it's probably got less clickbait. Like in your last newsletter, you were showing the difference between tweets that were saying stuff like, yeah, everybody's kind of lukewarm on Baker. Those were getting, a few hundred retweets. And then as opposed to these other tweets, which are like Seahawks on the precipice of trading for Baker Mayfield, getting thousands of retweets and thousands of likes, and causing all kinds of.
And nobody ever comes back. No one ever comes back and goes, oh, that wasn't true. Oh, yeah, that wasn't true, that thing you said. How about that? Oh, I guess next time I won't believe you. It's like, I don't know, nobody has ever addressed this very point.
Yeah.
What if someone's lying about league sources? What if somebody's just lying? What if somebody is just making something up and lying? There's no accountability. And nobody ever goes like, oh, well, sources inside the Seahawks said this thing. If that was even true, I mean, I want to hear the story one day later. Pete Carroll fires so-and-so. It's like, where is this leak coming? Where do you think the Seahawks, again, this is what I said at the time of the Russell Wilson trade. The Seahawks traded Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos. They had 3 players in return. They got all these picks. They had been, talking probably to a multiple teams in serious engaged negotiations. They had to probably have done it for several months, if not over a year. It was like all that time. Not one reporter had one report that was accurate. It was the trade that happens, and then boom. Not one reporter had the Deshaun Watson trade at all. They had negotiated all these, this, that, and the other thing. And the one report that came out about the Browns was that they were out of it for sure. Yeah. And so everybody is wrong about everything they report. And then we go out and we go, yummy, 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 yummy sources. Yummy, 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 yummy. It's a rumor. Yum, yum. I'm so good. It's like, what about their lying? What about when someone goes, why don't I just go on Twitter every day and say sources say this, that, and the other thing, as if I have a real source? Because it doesn't appear anyone does. When Pete Carroll calls up John Dorsey or whoever the GM of the Browns is today and says, like, who do you think is that source? John Dorsey or Pete Carroll? Like John Schneider? I mean, like, they're not, like, telling this to Nate Carroll and then, they're not telling this to, some intern. Like, what is your source? Some guy who's 3 degrees separated from the situation, who has been it's like telephone and all this kind of stuff. And you're just going like, well, when I was doing field goals, I would get DMs from random people saying, hey, I'm hearing this. And then they actually expected me to report that as if, some rando on Twitter actually. And I think what people do, I'm not, I don't want to call anybody out. Maybe you run a blog for an illustrated thing for sports, but it's like, I think some people go, oh, sure, I'll report that. A source. And it's like, you're not a source, and I think here's the thing too, like Adam Schefter, I don't want to ever defend Adam Schefter or whatever. And I know a lot of people hate him, but he doesn't ever tweet anything except for really the news. He's like, sources tell me that Larry Ogunjobi is signing a 1-year, $8.5 million extension. That's news. That's not like a rumor. And then he's saying this is about to happen in 10 minutes. And that's the thing that's happening because, it's like, and I do think like he's got a lot of potential, like, he's a very thin line that he's walking, but it's like, he is like, okay, you tell me this from the agent and I'll give you this and that and the other thing. It's a sketchy situation sometimes, but he only reports the news. He doesn't really get into like rumors that don't come true. He's really just like waiting, and then he like has to call and verify with like 2 or 3 different sources before he's going to even tweet it out. Ian Rappaport and Mike Garofalo and all those people, they literally work for the league. So they're not really even like insiders to me. They're just people who are like mouthpieces for the league. And that's how they get their information. It's like, hey, we need this to go out. Hey, you go get this out there, the other thing. And they do have a lot of connections. Jay Glazer, same as like Adam Schefter. He's really just reporting the news. almost everybody else, Jordan Schultz or Christina Anderson or anybody else that's like, I got this, that, and the other thing. It's like Tony Pauline, they're just like, I got sources. And then none of it comes true. And people are just so hungry for some sort of something exciting that they're like, fine, I'll go with that. But as many times as Jordan Schultz wanted to talk about what he was hearing about Russell Wilson, I didn't ever hear any accurate information whatsoever. As much as Brandon Marshall wanted to talk about how he had information, he was on the Seahawks. He knows Russell Wilson personally. He had nothing. He had no information. And why would he? Russell Wilson didn't even know until like probably just on the brink of the trade. You know what I mean? Like this is just like people willfully giving into a fantasy world because it's just more exciting than training camp starts in 5 weeks. I'm sorry. Like you just have to like Brian Monet got extended. You got something, yeah, eat that up. Do something with that. But to me, it's like, it's just we're like in a bullshit washing cycle machine and we're just stuck in cycle. And it's just like, oh, okay, here's more and more and more. And to me, it's like you either report the news like Schefter and Rappaport and like Glazer, like to me, those people are like reporting the news, or you just comment on sports like Colin Cowherd and those types of people or whatever. And you're just more of a commenter, and Mina Kimes, and that's fine too. There's like another, level of the NFL. They don't step out of their lanes. And I think like other people are like, I need to get into that lane. It's like, I want to be Adam Schefter. It's like, then you need to report the news. Then you need to go, sources tell me that Russell Wilson is being traded to the Denver Broncos on Thursday. And then that comes true, and then you're the person. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you have a thing. League sources tell me that the Seahawks are doing due diligence on Baker Mayfield. Mine too. Great. That's phenomenal. I read a book too. Like, what does that have? What are you saying? The Panthers are looking into Baker Mayfield, the person and the player. Fantastic. So are so is State Farm. I don't know what that, like.
So are basically every other team. I mean, team, every team's going to do that. There's no question about it. I mean, and the Jordan Schultz thing is interesting to me because he has said some things, like you said, he's not necessarily been very accurate. But one of the problems with saying sources say is that you don't necessarily have to put a timeline on it, right? So if Jordan Schultz says, like he said during the season, Russell Wilson demanded a trade. Well, when? Did he do it yesterday? Did he do it a week ago? Did he do it last year? And again, it's like, yeah, I'm sure that maybe he did get grumpy. Maybe there was some incident, But again, that would be more interesting to actually dive into the whole thing. At the same time, I think, if you are somebody who's reporting on the NFL and you want to have this like veracity to your comments and impact, you're not going to really dive into things like what happened to Russell Wilson. It's just easier to say like Russell Wilson's a top 5 quarterback. It's incredible. This trade is crazy. The NFL is blah, blah, blah. Like the whole thing is going off. It's like, look at, especially with the NFL, I think the offseason should be about film breakdown. I think it should be about understanding how things got done. How were some teams successful? How were they not? And I think if because you don't have to trash Russell Wilson, but I certainly think that this offseason could have been spent. A lot of people could have been analyzing Russell Wilson's play and been like, and not to say that he's horrible and this is why they traded him. No, the Seahawks traded Russell Wilson because he demanded a trade. That's flat out the reality. But beyond that, I think it's important to say, look, what happened to him? What happened to him last year? Did he come back too early? Why was Russell Wilson on pace to throw 60 touchdowns a couple years ago, and then he only ended up with like 40? Like those are far more interesting, but they're more nuanced, right? It's a much more nuanced conversation because that's not a clickbait, right? It's not clickbait to have a headline that says, why did Russell throw, 12 touchdowns in the last 8 games of the season?
I mean, it's like I think it's like to me, there's to just look for like, there was a disagreement about between Russell Wilson and Brian Schottenheimer. It's like, what year? 1997? Like, I don't know. Who cares? Like, that's so long ago. You're just looking for like a little bit of an emotional. To me, it's like, yeah, I would much rather hear like, what was Shane Waldron's deal? And what's he gonna do now? What's the next situation? And I wanted to talk about, because we're going to talk about the offense and the ceiling and everything like that. So I want to talk about like Shane Waldron and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, I mean, I think Jordan Schultz, it's pretty clear like he has some NBA inside sources or whatever, because when your dad rips the Sonics out of Seattle and takes them somewhere else and destroys the NBA in Washington, and gives you a hefty leg up on the world, especially like within the NBA. You might make some friends and along the way, and they tell you this, that, and the other thing. The problem also there is sometimes they'll give you good information. Sometimes they'll give you bad information. You have no filter to understand what is good and what is bad, because you don't really need a filter. You're just tweeting and you're just putting it all out there because you don't know what's going to be your next viral hit. And by the way, anybody who follows 20,000 people on Twitter, you're banned from Twitter too. Okay. Yeah. I see that Jordan Schultz has 100,000 followers and follows 20,000 people. I don't understand how anyone follows more than 300 people. I mean, I don't care if you have lists. I don't care what you do. That's too many people. If somebody's following me and they also follow 1,000 people, yeah, maybe I'm one of your special people that somehow gets into your algorithm and all that. But I just assume you don't know anything I'm saying at any point ever. So it's like, to me, that's like a fake follow. So 20,000 people, that's like a joke account. I don't know. Like, anybody who follows 20,000 people is like a joke account. And Jordan Schultz, get a microphone. You have enough money. Buy a mic.
Buy a mic. Or little, mic. Little B, right? Little B's got. Like,
Little B was like the first example. When I said that, that's exactly what I thought in my head.
So he gets an exemption. He follows me. I appreciate that.
But yeah, just I don't think so. I don't think that the Seahawks need any moves here. I think that Baker Mayfield. This is things too. It's like we can't predict which quarterbacks will get hurt. We also. At least 6 or 7 or 8 starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now today will get benched during the season for being bad. Like, that's just the reality. About a third or a quarter of the league is not really any better off than the Seahawks are. It just looks worse right now because we know Geno Smith hasn't started in 8 years really, and Drew Lock was benched by the Broncos and he lost a competition to Teddy Bridgewater. It's like, yeah, we know that the Seahawks are off in a bad situation, but honestly, we don't know if Tua Tagovailoa is any good. Like, we don't know if Daniel Jones has any business being named a starter. Like, we do know that actually a little bit, like probably not. But it's like we leave those people alone. And just because Drew Lock could have been a top 10 pick, it would have just taken one GM to say, because Drew Lock was getting some hype from some teams or around the league, like, this guy's got some Stafford in him. This guy's got he's a baller, like that kind of stuff. It turned out that the whole first round passed without him, but there were reports that some teams didn't even see Baker Mayfield as a first round pick, let alone not the first overall pick. And I don't think that's hard to see why. Baker Mayfield's stock shot up in the final year at Oklahoma. It wasn't there. There were plenty of reasons to see, like, yeah, it could have been him and Josh Rosen. There were just overrated players, just like there are every year. And if Drew Lock had been a top 10 pick, that's the one thing I think that separates people from this thing in their head that says the Seahawks are still looking for a quarterback like Baker Mayfield. And I'm just like, realistically, they're similar prospects. One went to a much better situation. It's not that hard to see. I do think, like, probably Baker Mayfield I know he has been better than Drew Lock at this point. But he's also had the opportunity and it's like we'll see. So let's talk about Drew Lock instead of Baker Mayfield.
Thank God.
And let's talk about this. I wanted to go with the offense. and the defense. And, I had a question at Seaside Joe. Let me share this. So I had a question at Seaside Joe just talking about like how good will the defense be next season, and I think it's a great question because I made me think about like, yeah, I guess like what are we really talking about here? Because I think like at times I'm like, it could be a pretty good defense, and then when I like really looked at it and really had to like break it down, I mean, if we're talking about great defenses, let's start with paying respects to like the 2013 era Seahawks. Pay respects to what a great defense looks like. Pay respects to how many Hall of Famers, how many Pro Bowlers, how many All Pros, how much depth, all the things that team had that maybe this team doesn't have yet. So that's the defense, and that's what got me sparked to this concept. So great question. Go to seasidejoe.substack.com if you're watching this somehow you don't know what that is. That's where the newsletter happens every day. But great question there about what I thought about how good could the defense be, and we'll get to that next. But let's start with the offense, Thad, because that's a whole that is still to me the game. Like to me the game is quarterbacks. I think it's like I'm very much on board with a quarterback-driven league. It's kind of a quarterbacks league. You're putting out there, you've got your franchise quarterback, and you're saying, go out there, win us the game. We'll give you all the help we can give you around that position. And then every week, a team is going to try and put the most obstacles in front of you on their defense. But it's like it starts with the quarterback. And, the problem with the Seahawks is, A, they don't have a great quarterback, and B, they don't have a great offensive line, and C, we don't know if they have a good offensive coordinator, and D, there's like situations with the wide receivers like DK Metcalf. There's injury questions always with the running backs. So Thad, there's a lot of questions to go through here. Let's start with the quarterback though. Pete Carroll's saying Geno Smith is like the leader right now, but that Drew Lock can catch up, and that Jacob Eason not really involved here. So talking about the players that are on the roster and assuming these are the players that will be still on the roster in week 1 against the Denver Broncos, who do you think ultimately does win this job?
Geno. I think Geno's the one, and I think he showed that, he played 3 games last year. They beat the crap out of the Jags, and then, had some really close 2 really close games. And then he played well at the end of the Rams game, even though he made a couple mistakes along the way. I just think he's doing what needs to be done, with the talent that he has. I mean, we have good players, we have good wide receivers, we have good running backs. It's about getting the ball to these players, and I think Geno's just the right guy for that, and I think that if he wasn't that kind of player, like you said, if let's say Geno was a free agent and he left and he was like, I want a starting chance, and we had Locke or Eason, or the other way around, and we didn't get Drew Lock in the trade, yeah, I think we're looking for another quarterback. But Geno's, I think he's really solid, and I think he's going to surprise some people. I don't think he's necessarily going to become an MVP candidate or anything like that, but he does what Pete Carroll has been wanting Russell Wilson to do for a decade, which is to throw over the middle, and I think I think you're going to see it's going to be a kind of a part of a lot of other things, like you said, is how exciting is this year going to be? I think this year is exciting enough considering that you have so many question marks, but they're all going to be essentially answered this year. So that's exciting to me. And I think that Geno is going to help answer those questions, and I think he's going to win. If Locke beats him out, I think that's because Locke unlocks something in himself. But I think that with Geno's stability, his familiarity with the offense, his teammates love him. He's a really well liked player. I think he's the one who's going to win. And
what is that like? you probably see more stories along those lines than I do. Do you have like any examples, like players talking about Geno Smith, or examples of like that teammate love, that leadership?
I mean, just throughout the year, like you hear stuff throughout the years, just little comments. But I think the biggest telling one was DK's, like, I would say just it's total hearsay, but I mean, him and DK, like during that Green Bay game, yelling at each other, or they weren't yelling at each other, but they were like spirited conversation about, you know, probably saying like, you're the only one that gets me the ball over the middle, like I mean, that Green Bay game, I think, was a huge indication of how the players feel about Russell Wilson and how they feel about Geno Smith. And I also think that with, I mean, what we heard from players in the offseason after the Russell trade, we immediately heard Lockett's going to get traded, Metcalf's going to get traded, the Seahawks are going to go into rebuilding mode. But what, like you've alluded to, like you've talked about, this sources thing versus like who are these sources versus reality. And the reality is that Quandre Diggs re-signed with the Seahawks. He wouldn't have done that if he didn't think there was some chance that they were going to at least be 500-ish next year,
Right.
that they had a future. Jamal Adams, he was happy to be here still. DK Metcalf, despite all the rumors, are unsubstantiated rumors at that, he's more than likely going to sign within the next couple weeks, if not in August. He's been on all these interviews. He was on Kevin Hart's podcast the other day. He's very calm about his situation. I think if the players on the team that are familiar with Geno, he's been around for about 3+ years. If they didn't think that he had it in him to be a good leader, then I think a lot of these guys would have said, I'm out,
Yeah, that's a great point about his longevity too, because I don't know. It's like I guess, like, I was trying to think how long Tavares Jackson was on the Seahawks. I guess he came back a couple times, and we know that Tavares Jackson was pretty limited as a starter. And I think, as you're saying, like there's definitely a limit to Geno Smith as a talent at back there. I thought like during those games with Geno Smith, he was a bit stiff. He was a bit, but he hadn't played very much in the last 6 years. So it's like there's part of that, and certainly by the third game against the Jaguars, getting a softer matchup, of course, against one of the NFL's worst excuses for a team. It's a nice way to sort of open up. And who knows, maybe Geno Smith would have done well if he had gotten another 4 games or something like that, and loosened up a little bit even more. The fact that he's now being treated as the starter, being called the starter by Pete Carroll until further notice, certainly is a vote of confidence when he goes out there and practices and everything like that. I think his statistics aren't necessarily indicative of a whole lot. So I'm not, but he did go 68% completion, 700 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, which of course Pete Carroll's kind of emphasized, like that's what we need to do here.
Yeah.
When you have Russell Wilson, it's certainly more of a Russell Wilson wants to believe that he's Peyton Manning or whatever, like kind of, I'm creating the plays here, which, to his credit, like he's good. He's good. Like Geno Smith doesn't have that. It's like Geno Smith, you want to go like, we're going to set you up Jimmy Garoppolo style. We're going to make sure that the players take care of you, and you just do what we say. Don't turn the ball over. Go through a couple reads if you can, but for sure, like hit that first read. And, the 49ers, I was amazed. Again, like this is what I'm just blown away by, because I know that I'm not a good X's and O's guy. I don't know shit. I just watch the games. I watch football, and I don't know like how people, like when I watch Jimmy Garoppolo back in say 2017, 2018, 2019, that era, I would see Jimmy Garoppolo go out there, play shitty for 3 quarters, and then the 49ers defense would keep the game close or give him, and then all of a sudden at the end of the game, he would throw a 5-yard pass to George Kittle, who would take it 60 yards for a touchdown, and people would go, man, that Jimmy Garoppolo is good. And it's like, am I crazy? Am I fucking crazy? Like, what is going on? How is this possible? That's the same thing with Jared Goff. It's the same thing, back when Jared Goff went to the Super Bowl, and I was like, this is one of the worst Super Bowl quarterbacks I've ever seen. And the whole year he's been this way. And people were like, I think he might be an MVP. And then the Rams even extended him. Like, well, maybe I am crazy because even the Rams extended him. And so, like, that to me is like, but still, with Geno Smith, it's like, hey, if you got DK Metcalf, and you're right, if they were rebuilding, trade Tyler Lockett. Do Tyler Lockett a favor, if anything. It's like, don't worry, because he's 30 years old, but Tyler Lockett's still around. I wrote the article, could the Seahawks put anyone on the trading block? I think it's an obvious call that, like, if the Seahawks do horribly out of the gate, it's possible that give Tyler Lockett an opportunity to go play somewhere else. Maybe he'll get to a Super Bowl, just like Odell Beckham Jr. last year, getting released by the Browns, and then he won a Super Bowl. And good for OBJ, I guess. But it's like, that's a situation where, like, they keep Tyler Lockett, so they've got Tyler Lockett, they've got DK Metcalf, they've added Noah Fant, as mostly his reputation coming out of Denver is as a receiver, not a blocker. We've got re-signed Will Dissly, which is kind of an interesting move at this stage. Certainly, it's all setting up for give the best situation around here, and the offensive line is going to be in one situation where it's like, clearly that is a hope that by 2023 it'll be one of the better offensive lines in the NFL, depending on how those tackles develop over the next year and everything like that. But just focusing on the quarterback again, it's like Geno Smith. If he can play that well against the shitty teams like the Jaguars, and if the Seahawks can play that well against the shitty teams as they did last year, then I think that there's no reason to think that the Seahawks are as shitty as some of the teams they're going to be playing this year, like the Falcons and the Giants and some of those teams out there that are I like the Jets, but maybe the Jets are really shitty. It's like those are some of the teams out there where it's like, okay, maybe the Seahawks do have a win, like a floor of winning 5 games right out of the gate, just because if they played that well against the Jaguars, we know that Pete Carroll, I would rather have Pete Carroll than I don't know. I was going to say Doug Peterson, but he's not. He's got a nice, he's got a nice little resume, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know why I couldn't think of any, I guess because we were just talking about the Jaguars, but like Pete Carroll's a good coach, right? So you got some advantage there. I think the question then, like we were alluding to earlier with Shane Waldron, I was thinking about this where it's like, what is Sean McVay's true coaching tree? Because he's hired by the Rams in 2017. Matt LaFleur was just a guy passing through. He's not really off of the coaching tree. Brandon Staley was just a guy passing through. And that's 2 guys that have developed really good reputations around the NFL and are head coaches now. And Kevin O'Connell was just hired by the Vikings. He's kind of, to me, like, I don't know, because like he was in the same situation as Shane Waldron. He wasn't really calling any plays. He's just kind of been hanging around Sean McVay for a long time. And Shane Waldron wasn't even hired as a head coach. He was just hired as an offensive coordinator because he wasn't the real offensive coordinator for the Rams. So it was considered a promotion. So he goes to Seattle. And I don't know if he's actually, we can't say, is he a guru? Is he the only way that the offense, when we talk about the ceiling here, especially the ceiling for Smith or Locke, the only way that it is like, wow, is if Shane Waldron is like a genius. And I don't know that we saw that last year. I mean, I guess, Thad, it's like kind of just discussing that separation. How much of it was Shane Waldron? How much of it was Russell Wilson? And what's the offense going to look like now that there isn't a quarterback who demands some say in what's going to be done?
Yeah, well, not necessarily even like say, but like refusal to do certain things, right? Like Russell just refused to do certain things. Like even with those PFF grades, like one criticism I've heard of the PFF grades, to your point, like how they're just not always that accurate. Where I've heard it said for years that our poor offensive line grades oftentimes are due to Russell holding the ball too long or rolling out when he should just throw the ball. You know what I mean? And I think that's just such a huge thing. And, nowadays we do say, it's a quarterback-driven league. But I think that just has more to do with the fact that, their talent at quarterback is so dynamic that, there are quarterbacks that can be game changers in one sense or another. But really, football is also a very specific kind of sport, and you need to get into rhythm. You need to go for certain plays, even if they're only short plays. You need to hand the ball off, no matter how good of a quarterback you are. And I was just hearing they were talking about it on the Man to Man podcast about Aaron Rodgers, his evolution as a quarterback, and how he has always been willing to, when it's necessary, to lean on the running game, no matter how talented he is. And you and I talked about this last time. Aaron Rodgers is absolutely more talented and a better quarterback all around than Russell Wilson, regardless of whether or not if he's like willing to listen to the coaching staff more often than not. And I think that's what you're going to see is like you're going to see Geno Smith find success because he's going to throw the ball quicker, because the offensive line is going to be given a chance to actually do their job, which is really no offensive line should be expected to do anything for longer than 2 or 3 seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, Russell Wilson does seem to lack at times like awareness and put himself into a sack, run into a sack, obviously extend the play when you're just like, it's a yin and a yang between like, really like we remember those highs of like, wow, I can't believe he created a play out of that.
Yeah. Can't believe
like the lows happen all the time where you're just like, why did you do that? What are you doing, man? What are you doing? And I don't think that those plays really exist with Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. Like it's much more like a steady line. And it's just like, that's like Aaron Rodgers obviously has this incredible big playability, this phenomenal cannon of an arm that's like accurate, and he makes throws that you just blow your mind. And Russell Wilson can do that too. And it's just like that. Also, that he raises the level of difficulty for the offensive line. There's still this. It's a very old concept that quarterbacks create their own sacks and are responsible. Like you will see the sacks in Denver go up. You will see the change in like how the offensive line is portrayed in Denver, and that should set some sort of precedent here, hopefully, for some Seahawks fans. And another thing I want to go back to that you mentioned about Geno Smith and Russell Wilson and the difference there. I don't think that Russell Wilson is a likable person. Like I don't know that like I think he's not a rude guy. He's not a mean guy. It's not about being mean or being nice. It's about how many people in that locker room are like, damn, that's a cool guy I want to hang out with. Like that is like, to me, when I see, it doesn't matter how much you hate Tom Brady and you can set aside the Super Bowls. You watch Tom Brady sometimes and it's like, damn it, he's kind of likable. Fuck, like he's kind of a nice, like he's kind of not, again, it's not nice, but it's just like, damn, he's kind of cool. Like I get that. I get why like there's like that, an aura around Tom Brady. I know that I know that Aaron Rodgers is like a controversial figure, but like at the end of the day, I think if you're his teammate, you're like, man, he's kind of a cool guy. Like he's a cool, calm, collected guy. Like I don't worry about him and where his head's at and like but I think like it's just a lot harder. I don't know how many people are coming out of this Seahawks team like, I'm going to be texting Russell Wilson. I'm going to be hanging out. I'm going to be keeping up with him. I don't know how many of his teammates are really like going to be keeping up with Russell Wilson at this point, because it did feel like there was that disconnect. And this is a guy that was on the roster for 10 years and in the franchise for 10 years. And it's like, what is even the relationship between Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson from now on? Is there even going to be a relationship? Like, is there any sort of friendship there? Russell Wilson seems to be, he's had such tunnel vision since he was a kid to become what he is now. Then he's become successful at it, but it's like he's just got that tunnel vision of like, I'm going to be this superstar Hall of Fame quarterback with like the Super Bowl rings and the Hall of Fame and the family, like everything that he wants. He has like kind of manifested a lot of it, but at the same time, I think hasn't made a lot of friends along the way. And that's just an outsider's point of view. There's no like anything there, but he just doesn't seem that likable to me.
No, I mean, I think that the best dynamic for the Seahawks with Russell was when he was kind of the nerdy, dorky guy that everybody followed, like but the defense kind of teased him, and there was the whole like he's not black enough thing, which was exaggerated, but it was still like something they ribbed him about, like there's that famous picture of him at the Floyd Mayweather fight with Richard Sherman where Russell's wearing like a leather do-rag and a leather pants and a leather button-up with this gaudy necklace, and like the homies always tease him for that. But like you said, Russell's been grooming himself for so long. He has such a chip on his shoulder, and that chip, like it's I talk about it with my friends and stuff over the years. Like it's important to have a chip on your shoulder, especially when you're starting out as, like I'm an artist, right? And when you're an artist, you want to you want to succeed. You're going to have this, like, you have this fire within you. I want people to hear me. I want to be heard. And then there's a point where when people start listening to you, it's like you don't need to yell at them anymore. You don't need to utilize that chip. Now you need to like actually be nuanced. You need to think about what your position is, where you're at, what can we do each season. And again, like Tom Brady, I hate the man for a lot of reasons, but I also really appreciate the fact that, for instance, like even that game against the Rams that he lost, I think his first 12 passes, I think he hit eight different receivers with his first 12 passes in that game. And that's just another indication of the kind of player he is, where we see Russell, like, you used to see it with Jimmy Graham, like, oh, is this week, is, Russell going to actually incorporate Jimmy? And then the next week you'd see him throw the ball at Jimmy Graham like 5 times in a row. Mm-hmm. And half the passes would be inaccurate or whatever. I mean, it was whether or not he's listening to the noise is different than Russell's philosophy, where the great quarterbacks, including Aaron Rodgers, and I think, you're going to see it with some of these young guys that are coming up with Lawrence, with Fields, even Mac Jones. Mac Jones might have hit his ceiling, but also Mac Jones might be a really good quarterback because he's going to walk into every game knowing, hey, this is what I can do. Mm-hmm. This is what we're going to focus on. I mean, what was that one game he threw? That playoff game, was that last year, the year before, where he threw the ball 10 times?
He was a rookie last year.
Mac Jones?
Yeah, there was the game against the Bills or whatever. He threw 3 or 4 passes.
Yeah,
and that was like obviously, like that's such a Belichick thing to be like, we're going to change the game plan every week depending on the teams we're playing and the limitations and what we have as a quarterback. And there's certainly that ability there, even with Belichick and Brady, that ability to go to Mac Jones where you can go like, finally, there's a quarterback who I can tell what to do every week, and he's going to do it. And Russell Wilson was that guy in the beginning of his career, like you were saying. And I think like there is that opportunity now to go to Denver. We might see a resurgence of Russell Wilson as a revered figure again, because now he gets to be the Super Bowl winning quarterback going to a team of players who were not around for the Broncos' last Super Bowl, and like kind of be that guy where he's cool again.
Yeah, he and I think that a lot of the players are excited to play with him in Denver. It seems like he's getting a lot of praise, but I'll tell you what, like I can't remember the dude's first name, but they have one young running back named Williams, right? Javonte Williams, and then they have Melvin Gordon. And as much as they are really excited to play with Russell, if Russell is not handing the ball off to them, you're going to see some friction, and it's not going to be world burning, I want to get traded, kind of talk, but it's going to start friction, it's going to start, and the receivers are the same thing. Like Russell tends to over focus on one player or another throughout a game. We've seen it all the time, especially the last couple of years, where like, DK would have 150 yards, Metcalf would have 50 yards, Lockett would have, 100. What was that game? Lockett had like 180 yards, and I think Metcalf had like 20 yards.
Yeah.
Like a great quarterback. That's great. That's really good that Russell did that and exploited those matchups. But at the same time, if you're really a great quarterback, if you're as good as you think you are going to spread the ball around. And
well, I mean, like even the Rams last year, you had Cooper Kupp setting records and winning the Triple Crown, and like Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp had a historic relationship, like the amount they worked on that. And still, Van Jefferson had over 800 yards. Odell Beckham Jr. resurged his career. Robert Woods still was a viable threat. Tyler Higbee got his piece too. Like you could have a guy that was, even if you still focus on a guy, a talented guy, you can still, you got to have a whole game plan.
Yeah, and that focus would allow you to get other players open. I mean, it's just like with a basketball team, if like you got a guy like Luka on the Dallas, right? Like one of the big problems with the Mavericks is they don't really have a third or fourth option. You know, they're able to do a lot with Luka at the running the offense, but really they need another couple players to take the heat off. You know, and that allows you, if you are a distributor, you can focus on those things. You can find those mismatches, and a lot of it has to do with just being kind of going into the game, knowing that you are going to go into this game spreading the love around. You know, you're not going to worry about what your stats look like. You're not going to worry about throwing a 70-yard pass to Metcalf, you know, in the first quarter. You know, I mean, how many times, especially last year, how many times did Russell just make these ridiculous throws on third down? Like, yeah, they work sometimes, but like, really just get the ball to Freddie Swain, because really he's the only one that's getting single coverage.
That was the thing too. It's like if you wanted to do any coverage, you know, like we could, people were talking about like what to do in the off season, like you could show all of the times that Russell Wilson had an open receiver and didn't see him and didn't go that way, didn't do anything about that thing that would have been a good play or whatever. And this is the last thing I'll say about, Russell Wilson, because, bringing up Tom Brady, it's like Tom Brady, a lot of the hate for Tom Brady is just jealousy, because it's like he's fucking there every day, every year at the stupid Super Bowl. And like, he's very successful. And like, I don't know, like, I mean, like, did he cheat? Did he do this, that, and the other thing?
Yeah,
I don't know. Sure, like, whatever. I mean, like, at the end of the day, if Belichick and Brady cheated to get 6 Super Bowl championships, then I guess that's who we need to respect the most. You know, it's like they did it because this is a cheating world. And, and I'm certainly not a cheater. And so that's like why maybe I'm not more successful, but as well as other things. But Tom Brady, all the stories you hear, whether it's New England or Tampa Bay, Tom Brady could tell you the name of everybody that works for the Buccaneers. And it's not just because, like, he's trying to put on a face or a front or something like that, but it's like, if you sign with the Buccaneers, if you're drafted by the Buccaneers, if you're signed after the draft by the Buccaneers, you come to training camp, Tom Brady is going to be like, "Oh, hey, Kobe, what's up, man? Good to see you. How's everything? Blah, blah, blah." Why? Because that's just who Tom Brady is, I think. Like, that's just his personality. Now, Russell Wilson may go, "Oh, I should learn everybody's name on the roster, and I'll study this, and I'll figure that out." And it's like, you can do all that kind of stuff, but you're doing it because you think that's what you're supposed to do, and you're doing it to, like, get there. And, like, it's not about doing something. It's just being that person and, like, actually, like, having that presence and awareness, and realizing that, like, I think Tom Brady always knew and has always known he's one of a team, and, winning a Super Bowl is so hard that it's like you're going to win or lose. You're going to get that far, maybe just by the this much, and it could come down to, your third tight end or whatever. And it's like, know that, and, like, bring up everybody else around you to be that, as opposed to, I got to go out there and win the game today. And it's like, it's not just about the eye and everything like that. And I think when Russell Wilson was this person throwing 400 passes a season and told, "Hey, you're not there yet. We need you to sort of follow this game plan." Obviously, the Seahawks were more successful offensively in ways, having that Marshawn Lynch impact, which is like can never be understated enough, like, or overstated enough, is like that Marshawn Lynch impact, that full team dynamic offensively there was no DK Metcalf on those Seahawks. You didn't have like a, wow, that guy is such a talented receiver, but they got the job done. They gave their defense opportunities to rest. The offense last season, that defense was just out there so long. And you're just like, God, you're going to send the defense out there again? Why couldn't you just get a couple of first downs? That's one thing. Like, it's like, oh, because later on in the fourth quarter, I'll just get us down there and get a touchdown. I don't want the quarter. Just give the defense a break, like that's that's where it's like maybe this change from Russell Wilson to Geno Smith or Drew Lock will pay off the most. It's just like having a little bit more control, especially as you're trying to develop this offensive line.
Yeah, and I think, like, again, right, like, we haven't seen that. We haven't seen a quarterback who comes in we haven't seen a quarterback for the last 5 or 6 years in Seattle who comes in willing to follow a game plan, willing to follow a game plan. I understand that, like the Russell getting Schottenheimer fired story, whatever that was, if that was a story, it wasn't any new information. It was only rehashing what Michael Sean Dugar talked about, which is in 2021, Russell got really mad, before the second Cardinals game, and said, I want to do this, I want to do that with the offense, and they just said no. And of course, supposedly they laughed him out of the room, which I doubt that they laughed him. Oh, you're an idiot. Give me a break. That's just sensationalizing. But at the same time, they probably, if there was anything, they were probably just frustrated with him. They were like, dude, just like, do what we ask. Like they were talking on the Man-to-Man podcast the other day about, and it's been talked about multiple times this offseason. When were the Seahawks the best? It was when we were focused on RPO, when our offense was focused on the run pass option. And Russell is really good, or at least was really good at identifying mismatches, identifying open receivers in those moments. And you've seen it with Freddie Swain. Like, it frustrates me so much watching the Seahawks the last couple years to see Freddie Swain get open when and he has a decent amount, he has some okay statistics, like he's accumulated decent numbers, Freddie Swain, and watching the offense struggle, that there's other times that he's open, that that's not the only time. So that Russell can identify when those mismatches are there, but B, they're there more often. And I think that's what you're going to find. You're going to find even Jacob Eason, who's a top-rated quarterback, went to the University of Washington. He was, one of the top, blue chipper. He's in there as a humble quarterback. He would have already been cut. We know how quickly the Seahawks cut players that don't listen to the coaching staff, that don't read the playbook. Greg Jennings is a perfect example. I was so excited. My brother and I were so excited when Greg Jennings got drafted because of his physical. Gary Jennings?
Yeah, I think Greg Jennings is the Packers wide receiver.
Right. Okay. Gary Jennings. Yeah. So he has the physical ability. You saw, it looked like he was going to be a really good player, but according to reports, he just did not learn the route tree at all. So he would go out there and he just wouldn't know what he was doing, and he'd kind of improvise. Well, you're not Tyler Lockett, brother. So he got.
Doesn't it shock you? Doesn't it shock you that there's been? I can't be shocked, like the Bo Melton, Derek Young stuff, like how Pete Carroll had to say they weren't in condition, they were disappointed. Like, you're a 7th round pick, you get drafted in the NFL. It's a shock. You just barely made it in. You would have signed with a team after, and even if you had, it's like I would think that you'd spend every second of every day thinking, "Oh my God, what have I got to do to keep this job?" As opposed to like, oh shit, I didn't do so. Like, how does that happen? Like, how do all these 4th round receivers for the Seahawks, like, how could you not like just be so? I would just say, how could you not be so scared that you're going to lose your job, that you were just like always working?
Yeah, I mean, Tariq Woolen hurt his hamstring too a little bit, so I think some of it's just maybe getting overly excited.
Did Pete Carroll call him out for it?
No,
because that's the difference to me. Is like, it's not so much the injuries or whatever. Yeah. It's like, why? Because it's like, why would Pete Carroll call someone out like, oh, we're really disappointed that they broke his arm, he broke his arm or something like that. It's well, that wasn't his fault. But it's like, if you're going like, yeah, we're really disappointed that these guys weren't doing something. It's like, wow, I can't imagine I hope, if anything, like if you heard Pete Carroll say he's disappointed to the media, that you will never, ever, ever screw up again.
Yeah, I hope that's what's going to happen. They seem like good guys. They seem like
I mean, like especially like this is so crazy. Like this is what I think also it's like such a big factor. Imagine if I had been a talented person and I was like, because I'm a huge guy. So I'm such a huge guy that when I was in high school, people were like, you have to play football. you have to play basketball because I'm 6'6". At the time, I weighed a lot more, and they were like, you have to go out there. And so I did, but I wasn't like conditioning. I wasn't really putting in any effort or whatever. But let's just imagine that I did, and that like along the way I got drafted in the NFL or whatever. My mindset at 21 years old, 22 years old, 23 years old, I mean, yeah, I would have been screwing up and all the time. This has to be some like sort of awareness, and I didn't have any of that awareness when I was 22. So it's like it's unfortunate that these guys get their opportunities to make millions of dollars when they're so young. Sometimes maybe that talent is what gets them over the hump. Sometimes maybe they had an experience in life that wakes them up earlier in life, and they're kind of like more aware of what's going on. I can't imagine, someone like Tom Brady who won 3 Super Bowls so early. Or Russell Wilson. Like I can't imagine that there wasn't like some sort of like, hey, I'm a more professional than the average 23-year-old or whatever. But like, yeah, it's such an awkward time to be told you're on the cusp of millions of dollars. You're in the NFL. Maybe there's just that lack of like, I guess just, spatial awareness.
Yeah. And we'll see. I mean, that's why they have these different camps, right? And we'll have training camp coming up, and they know, and the Seahawks have always been good about, not really messing around. Like if they don't really like a guy, they're going to cut him, and that's good. I mean, as much as people kind of crap on the way that they draft, they don't really fuss around with players that aren't really with the program, and I know.
Do you think that D. Eskridge is in danger?
Well, I heard something about him kind of not being very focused this offseason, but I hope, I think Waldron and Dickerson are really excited to utilize him more. I hope that he's focused. But wasn't there some report, I know we talk about unsubstantiated reports, but I heard something about Eskridge kind of not being the most focused right now.
Again, it's like, and it's crazy because you're 25 years old, or whatever. You're coming in so late. You gotta like, let's say in the Rams situation, but Rams have they're gonna have way more passing offense with Stafford there now. It's like, but like in a Rams situation, Van Jefferson was a second-round pick, didn't do much of anything his rookie year. He did have 800 yards and 50 catches last year, but I think kind of just watching the Rams every week, Van Jefferson, he's not a very exciting, like, I don't know that his future is that great, but, maybe there's that second-year leap for D. Eskridge, and obviously a big part of it is just being available. There isn't a lot of competition there after DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, depending on how Freddie Swain shows up and everything. Let's wrap up the offense so that we can get to the defense. I'm looking here at footballoutsiders.com. This is their DVOA rankings for the offense. We see last year the Seahawks had number 7 in DVOA. Previously, the year before that, they were number 6. They had a pass DVOA of 8th and a rushing DVOA of 6, so top 8 in both passing and rushing. I know the DVOA is not the end-all, be-all. It's just another measurement. It's basically just measuring like how big were these teams coming up, passing the ball and rushing the ball in key situations. And this can be dramatically impacted by factors that don't really tell you the whole picture. And the big difference here, as we keep saying, is the change at quarterback. But that doesn't necessarily mean that DVOA will go down. It may mean that a volume will go down dramatically. Maybe explosiveness will go down dramatically. I think that the Seahawks will. If Geno Smith is the starting quarterback, I think the Seahawks will have tremendous issues throwing the ball downfield. It's just going to be more of a Hail Mary situation every time. It's kind of like hoping that something goes well, I think, unless Shane Waldron is scheming Freddie Swain and Tyler Lockett and to be wide open. DK Metcalf probably going to be a lot more contested catches, but it's just like scheming those guys open. And we know that Tyler Lockett is a phenomenal route runner, receiver, someone who's going to find ways to break open in the secondary and find something to do. But will Geno Smith be someone who gets him the ball, as opposed to Drew Lock, who doesn't have any concerns about his arm strength and like really, throwing the ball downfield? And I think that's maybe even his specialty. But at the same time, how is he going to be able to get through a season without 15 or 16 interceptions. Should he be the starter? And, I think with Matthew Stafford, he threw 17 interceptions last season. He also had 41 touchdown passes. And it's like, well, if Drew Lock can throw 41 touchdown passes, maybe that's acceptable. But we haven't seen anything like that from Drew Lock. He had 16 touchdown passes and 15 interceptions, I believe, when he was the starter for 1 year with the Denver Broncos. Different team, different situation. But there's got to be those questions. And then when we talk about the offensive line, Thad, we're talking about Charles Cross as a rookie left tackle. On the upside, you've got Rashawn Slater of the Chargers, who was a phenomenal left tackle last year as a rookie, first-round pick, but is a different player. There's just totally different players, and Charles Cross coming out of Mississippi State, heavy air raid offense, lots of passing situations, not a lot of rushing situations. I've done one write-up so far on Charles Cross coming out of a game and not really even analyzing his game, but just kind of like sharing it with the world and saying, well, let's focus on him. And I thought he played really well against a Georgia defense that, of all the players that I showed him going up against, being Jermaine Johnson, who was a first-round pick, and Azeez Ojulari of the Giants, who was a second-round pick and then a very good rookie with the Giants this past year, and going up against Nolan Smith, who will be a first-round pick. Of all those guys, Jordan Davis, who was a first-round pick, of all those guys, maybe the best player was a defensive tackle named Jalen Carter. And even though he was a true freshman in 2020 when he went up against, and it was only just like one or two plays, he was so dominant against this Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter could be a top 4 pick in the 2023 NFL draft. That's how good he is. So when you talk about the way that Charles Cross was a freshman in his first season when he was going up against Jalen Carter. So there is that ceiling there, I think, of Charles Cross as a left tackle in the NFL being a Pro Bowl solid left tackle. How that goes in his first year, I think we cannot underestimate the fact that even if Charles Cross has more talent than, say, Zach Allen, right, of the Arizona Cardinals. I'm trying to think of guys he could be potentially lining up with this year. Obviously Nick Bosa, he'd probably be on the right side, but when we're talking about some of these guys that they could be facing, like Ashawn Robinson of the Rams or whatever, even if Charles Cross, he has to be so talented, but there is such a level of, we're talking about a 21, 22-year-old guy going up sometimes against 30-year-old dudes who still have all this power and strength, but they also have experience. And it's a very tough assignment. It's a very tough assignment your first year. So he's going to have so much to learn. He's learning the playbook. He's learning, there's so much going on for Charles Cross. We have to give him some of that room to make mistakes, and that could happen. And then the really concerning part for the Seahawks is not that Charles Cross is a rookie, but that Charles Cross might be the best offensive lineman on the team already. Austin Blythe, the center, didn't really play much of last year. There wasn't really any interest of him after his career with the Rams, in which he was starting for 2 years and went to a Super Bowl, and there wasn't really that much interest. And now the Seahawks can go, well, Shane Waldron, and we don't have a center, and Ethan Pochich doesn't do anything for us, so here, you come in and we'll do Austin Blythe. Damian Lewis had a lot of struggles in his first year under Shane Waldron and moving to the left side, and so Damian Lewis, and then Gabe Jackson, 30-plus years old, didn't have the best season last year. It was right when the free agency period started, I had said maybe he would get traded, and there's still people talking about that now, about whether or not Gabe Jackson could be traded to the right situation eventually, or if he'll just stay here because the Seahawks need players and don't really have any experience. You're going to go and just do no experience on the entire offensive line, and then right tackle, it could be Jake Curhan, Stone Forsythe, or Abe Lucas. I would say maybe it just depends. There's a lot of different ways that could go. I think Curhan might be the guy that I would put slightly in front right now. But Abe Lucas, he's a guy that maybe he was definitely not the prospect that Charles Cross was, but coming out of a similar situation with Washington State. And I think sometimes we're surprised. Sometimes these things go where it's the third-round pick was better than the first-round pick. We've seen that quite a lot. I always think about when the Cardinals drafted Bryant Johnson in the first round and Anquan Bolden in the second round at wide receiver. And obviously Anquan Bolden was Anquan Bolden. But Abraham Lucas, he could be the starting right tackle. Overall, I think, as you were saying, Thad, like maybe the situation could be like a better situation, like kind of a landing spot to not have Russell Wilson demanding as much from the offensive line. I think the offensive line will be more in the realm of, okay, this is a pass protecting situation. Just go out there, protect the pocket, pass the situation. Okay, this is a running situation. You run here to that spot, do your job as well as you can. This is a running situation. Like there's not going to be as much improvise, not be as much schoolyard plays, and maybe this will be an easier assignment for the offensive line. What is, how are you feeling about sort of the whole situation around the quarterback position before we move to the defense, like the whole setup around the quarterback situation? How are you feeling about that?
I am, as a Seahawks fan, as somebody that's been a Seahawks fan since literally I was in the womb, I am really excited. I'm really, really excited. I think Shane Waldron and I mean, I just even love the look of Andy Dickerson and Shane Waldron. I mean, Andy Dickerson looks like Jonah Hill from Superbad. You know what I mean? With his like white fro and everything. And, I think there's been such like I talked about it before with you, and I think I've talked about it before last year where, as much as people kind of crap on Carroll and Schneider, I think one of the things that they do that people respect, that players and coaches respect, is that they give people a chance to fail or succeed. And, with Tom Cable, Pete Carroll, like they got as much juice out of that orange as they could, right? And they also gave him a lot of responsibility. So it wasn't just going to be easy to just fire him one day and let everything go. So, and then they get Mike Solari. So they're kind of literally on the same tip where they're like, they want an experienced coach who has some creativity to make something with the young players. And we see, okay, that didn't necessarily work, but we know that basically the last, 6 or 7 games, Carroll gave all responsibility to Dickerson to call those plays to change the offensive line. So the last 6 or 7 games, which were literally historic, against defenses, some people can say, oh, well, we played this team or that. Well, you know what? All those teams that we played last year, they all had relatively good defenses. You know what I mean? And some of the defenses weren't great, but some of them were really good. And we did an incredible job, and some of it was like, I was kind of sad to see Ethan Posick leave because he was one of the most vocal supporters of their new zone blocking scheme that Dickerson introduced. It wasn't the same kind of zone blocking scheme that Cable did. It was a different kind of zone blocking scheme, but similar in that sense where Posick said, instead of fussing around with what the rules are and all this other stuff, you pick your guy, like the scheme was pick your guy, hit him and push him back. You know what I mean? And I think that's where that's what makes me so excited. I really do think that Andy Dickerson is one of our secret weapons. And I think that the offensive line, like you said, the support is going to show a lot of improvement. I think the mistakes that the offensive line are going to make is going to be because, like you said, they're young. So there's going to be times where they just don't know certain things. Like some, defender is going to, some guy is going to, the 30-year-old guy is going to like put a move on them that they're not really familiar with. You know what I mean? I mean, I think you even saw that with Damian Lewis. Like it's hard. Damian Lewis is very good. I'm hoping to see a big jump with Damian Lewis. He might, I don't know if he's going to, do you think he's going to stay on the left? Do you think they might push him back over to the right?
I think like Gabe Jackson is, that situation, I don't know, that doesn't necessitate a Gabe Jackson trade, but I just don't know that, like, I think Gabe Jackson could be more valuable to another team right now at this point. And I think like with a little bit of savings, I mean, if the Seahawks are making moves to save a few $1 million on Shelby Harris, why not make a move to, unless you really think like Gabe Jackson is an important piece of a team that's going to make the playoffs, which again, as you were saying before, it's like the Seahawks think that they're going to make the playoffs, or at least they hope to make the playoffs. I don't think that I know that it's very enticing to look at the Seahawks and to look at the next year's draft and want them to have a bad record. I think that's incorrect. I think that is a bad situation. It is never good to be terrible. And we see this with so many teams that when they're like, oh, wow, like if you go 2 and blah, 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 it's like, you're just now you've got a whole other set of problems, and it's just so hard to climb out of that hole where you're going like, yeah, but next year's draft could have Andrew Luck. Do you remember Andrew Luck? Like and I mean, like Andrew Luck, very talented quarterback. If he was in the NFL today, maybe he would have won a Super Bowl. But if you're banking on a quarterback and he was as good of a prospect as you'll ever see. And where are the Colts? They're going through Phillip Rivers and Jacoby Brissett and Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan at the end of his career. Like, and in that same draft, the Seahawks got Russell Wilson. So would you rather have Russell Wilson or Andrew Luck? You're talking about like, I want the guy who's a better prospect. Do you want the guy who's a better prospect, or do you just want to like be a good team and try and get and then figure it out? Because obviously there's a lot of people out there who are going to be pounding the table for Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I believe in Bryce Young. I don't know that much about CJ Stroud yet, but setting all that aside, everybody knows my situation with Grayson McCall at this point. Yeah. And it's like, I would be great with Grayson McCall, and he might be a 4th round pick or a 5th round pick. I don't know. It's not really a big deal to me. So to me, it's like this obsession with like getting the number 1 pick or trading up to get a pick. I would love for Seahawks fans to get that out of their heads. I would just love to be, at the end of the day, to have convinced people, root for a 9-8 record or whatever it is that's their true ceiling at this point, because you just cannot predict how things are going to go with Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin and Ryan Tannehill and Brandon Weeden and Brock Osweiler and every quarterback that was drafted ahead of Russell Wilson, where you're saying, I need the better pick. I need the better pick. I need it. Please, sir. It's like, give up this like obsession with prospects. I think it's cool. Like, yeah, it's exciting. You watch the draft. There's early picks. Like, the draft is my favorite thing. But at the end of the day, we know at this point that the draft is not predictive of future success. It is more likely, the earlier ago that you've got those skills, that talent. I mean, you could look at last year's rookie class, and it's all there laid out, from Jamar Chase to Michael Parsons to Rashawn Slater, that those guys at the top were so good. But Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin, they were fucking good too. They were supremely talented, but you can't predict injuries. You can't predict, a commitment. You can't predict leadership. You can't predict a lot of things that are going to go wrong. You can't figure it. You can say that a guy is too short to play in the NFL, and then all of a sudden he's winning a Super Bowl in his 2nd year. It's like that to me, like, just go out there and do the best job that you can do. And that's what the Seahawks clearly are doing by not trading Tyler Lockett, even though, it's like he's 30 years old. He's expensive. He's still talented. If you were truly rebuilding, you would think, get as good of a pick as you can get for Tyler Lockett right now, because – yeah, you're tanking or whatever. Like, clearly last year the Houston Texans were tanking. Clearly last year the Houston Texans were trying to get the best pick, because anybody that was any good, they were getting rid of him. And once it was clear that Deshaun Watson was not a part of the team, that they were going to have to go with the players that they had, Tyrod Taylor, Davis Mills, it was just like, oh, get rid of Mark Ingram. Get rid of anybody that's got a little bit of something to them. If they want to get move, we'll try and trade him. If we can't trade him, we'll release him. And that's what they did. And even then, the Texans didn't get a top 3 pick or whatever. They were like number 4 or 3 or 4, whatever. And it's like they just wanted to do the thing. And I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the Texans situation right now. I mean, and that's the fear that I think Seahawks fans should have, is that they are in a Texans situation, that they will be that bad, that they do have that far to climb. But I think that for the Seahawks, you've already got 2 first-round picks. You've already got 2 second-round picks. You've already got a pretty good cachet of things to use next year to keep improving. You don't need to tank on top of all that. You don't need to hope for a trade up or the worst pick, the worst record for the best picks or whatever. This is what I always go back to with the 2010 team. The 2010 team could have either had a top 10-ish pick if they lose that final game against the Rams, or they go to the playoffs. You get Beastquake, you beat the Saints. Marshawn Lynch is a hero in the team in the city now, and all of a sudden momentum is moving towards that 2011 season. Where that 2011 season things started to feel pretty good with the way Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas were all playing together. And you started to feel some momentum going into the 2012 season. So I would say go out there and do the best job that you can. Unfortunately, Thad, I just think that the ceiling for the offense, I don't know how they're going to score 30 points. I mean, I think that this is a 30-point plus league. You know, to go out there and win consistently, if you got to have a Josh Allen, a Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow with 3 phenomenal receivers, Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp, Aaron Rodgers, like Tom Brady to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski. I mean, those are not just quarterbacks. Those are loaded offenses. And the Seahawks don't have a quarterback that we can reliably expect to put up those kinds of points. So my ceiling for the Seahawks is like, this is like a 20 to 24 point offense because you're so game managey with Geno Smith. You're so like, try and win time of possession. Have a 40-minute offense where it's like you've got 40 of the 60 minutes. You're running the ball. Here's a prediction. I think Ken Walker is a better running back than Rashad Penny. I think that like he will kind of take over as the season goes on, whether that's caused by injuries or not. I think like Ken Walker is just a better running back than Rashad Penny. I think he's better than Rashad Penny was coming out of San Diego State. And I think he's better now, even after Rashad Penny had all those yards. And I think like Ken Walker will kind of take the lead eventually. And so that's something to monitor. But I just think like the ceiling for me for the offense is like 25th, like 24th, 20th, like something that's like very you just how does anyone reconcile in an offense with Geno Smith or Drew Lock or Baker Mayfield? How does anyone reconcile that can consistently compete with like 13 of the 16 teams in the AFC plus the NFC, where you've got the Cowboys and I mean the Eagles have reloaded and they've got they've got a very good offensive line. I'm not a huge Jalen Hurts guy, but at the end of the day, you've got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. It's just a very I think they've got the tools to make some scores happen. You've got the Packers, obviously. You've got the Vikings with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook, and you've got some really the Bucks. There are less good teams maybe in the NFC, but ultimately, I just don't know how you reconcile that a team with these components on offense can consistently score 30 points, or even against anyone other than like the Jaguars get to that point at all. So that's my ceiling. My floor is obviously at the bottom because I don't know if we're being realistic. It's just possible that a team with Geno Smith or Drew Lock will be in competition with the Daniel Joneses of the world to be like, okay, this is a rough thing, where if you're so one-dimensional against the run, I think like less defenses than usual ever, are set up to stop the run. But it's like if you're so run heavy and you're doing this Mac Jones thing, like you were saying, 3 or 4 passes or whatever, that's still only going to get you 17 points. You're just trying to win the time of possession and hope that your defense is really good. So that's where I'm at in like the 24 to 32 range for the Seahawks. I mean, do you have a higher ceiling? And I guess I would say is how do you expect the Seahawks to get there? And as you're talking, I'm going to have to step away for 30 seconds to feed Clark because it's past Clark's feeding time.
Feed Clark.
I will.
I mean, I think there's a world where maybe we're not ranked that high points per game as an offense, but I think that our efficiency on offense very much so is going to go up. Like maybe we do have an offense that doesn't, maybe like you said, let's see, you said the ceiling was about 20 something points a game, and then the floor was probably the worst offense in the league. I would probably say I would agree with that to some extent. I think our ceiling is probably more like 23 to 24 points a game, only because I think we have such dynamic components on offense that are going to be, even if it's not Waldron or Dickerson, showing exactly who they are. I think that even if you have mediocre play callers, I think no matter what, your team is going to rely on the most talented players on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that the Seahawks have some really, really talented players on offense. And I think like the ability, I think Waldron, one of the reasons he wanted to come here was because Lockett and Metcalf are interchangeable on the field for who's the number one and number two receiver. I think those matchups are going to get exploited more. I think that, I agree with you to some extent. Absolutely. There's a world where our offense is like the worst in the league, but I just don't see with, even if Carson is Carson's probably not going to play. And that's really sad because I love Chris Carson. But let's say Carson plays 5 or 6 games. Penny plays 10. Walker plays 5 or 6. DJ Dallas starts 2 or 3 of those games. And then Homer shows some promise. And you're talking about 5 really interesting running backs. You're talking about 5 very talented, interesting players. You're talking about an offense that is focused on getting the running backs the ball out of the backfield, catching passes. I mean, when they finally started throwing the ball to Carson, he did some really good things with the ball. The offense was much more dynamic, and it wasn't just the screen passes. I think there's a chance that maybe, like I was saying while you were away, I think the ceiling is probably more like 23 or 24 points a game to me, only because we do have such talented players on offense,
No, that is, I think that's my ceiling is like 23 or 24 points, which is
23
not
or 24?
good.
Okay.
I mean, to me, that's like, the worst is usually like 16 points a game. That's like usually like 30 seconds, but 22, 23 points, that's kind of like, to me, that I think that's usually right in the 20th range. I guess like in there, but ultimately are you scoring? That's just an average, right? So it's like, are you scoring? Some weeks you're scoring 0, 3, 7, 9, 6. This team has that ability, I think, to be like held to single digits.
One score? Really?
Oh, for sure. I mean, first of all, this team with Russell Wilson could not score against Aaron Donald and the Rams and Jalen Ramsey. I mean, this team with Russell Wilson couldn't do that. So, there were struggles there. The 49ers have a great defense usually, and those are going to be hard teams to score against. The Cardinals, surprisingly, were ranked in the top 10 in DVOA against both the pass and the run, just like the Seahawks. And I don't know, to what extent they'll be as good without Chandler Jones or whatever, but, they've got talented players to the point of, and Vance Joseph to the point of again, it's not so much that, there's the Seahawks side of it, what they're bringing to the table, but then it's also the what the other teams are bringing to the table, those defensive matchups. So it's like, it's not just the Seahawks. It's the Seahawks against, say, Aaron Donald, the Rams and all that. It's also now Geno Smith against Aaron Donald and the Rams. And it's like last week, they just faced Aaron Rodgers. The week before that, they just faced Tom Brady. Now they're facing Geno Smith. It has to be worse, for the Seahawks than it was in those. And I think, I want to share another page here.
Yeah.
If I can get it right. Because the Seahawks do have talented wide receivers, but I think in the modern NFL, that's not as exclusive as it once was. In the NFC, a lot of these teams would be thinking we're set at wide receiver, or at least they want to get there. A lot of recent first round picks and everything like that. The Cowboys, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, the Giants, Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney. I'm a fan of Kadarius Toney if he gets his act together and all that. The Eagles, as I said, Smith, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel with Washington, De'Ami Brown. Obviously, the Bears are in a horrible situation. The Packers, obviously, they're going more on the Aaron Rodgers route. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. The Falcons are in a pretty bad situation with Drake London as being the best player there. But Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry with the Saints, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin with the Buccaneers, AJ Green, Marquise Brown, Rondell Moore, DeAndre Hopkins with the Cardinals, Allen Robinson and Cooper Kupp with the 49ers, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle with the 49ers. So it's like just matching teams up one-on-one in the NFC. Right. To me, it's like, yeah, you've got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Now we'll go to the defense. We'll talk about the Seahawks defense. It's like, what about the other team? Are they going to outscore you? Because like they've also got Allen Robinson and Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay calling plays. And like that's where there's just that separation where if we're just looking at the Seahawks, I think it's like, yeah, well, it's easier to say, well, these are the advantages that they have. And I would like to believe that. But for that to happen, I think Shane Waldron needs to be the second coming of Sean McVay. And I don't know where that would come from. At this point, it's like, well, I don't know with what we saw last year and how much of it was dictated by Shane Waldron. I don't know what came out of that, how many guys were scheming open, because I know that John Gilbert shared a tweet, retweeted a tweet that was showing like how many receivers, how much often they got separated, or there weren't open receivers and stuff like that. And the Seahawks did not rank very well in that category, and how much of that has to do with Shane Waldron. We'll find out a little bit more this year. But I think I just think this is a ceiling of I think it's just a very high scoring league. It's what the NFL wants. The NFL wants you to be able to pass that ball, and they want you to be able to put up 400 passing yards, throw 5 passing touchdowns. Other teams are gearing towards that. They've been gearing towards that. You look at the playoffs last year. This is a league right now where it's like the team that wins is the team that has a quarterback and a passing offense that makes plays in the last 5 minutes of the game. You can point to Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. You can point to Patrick Mahomes versus Joe Burrow. You can point to Matthew Stafford versus Tom Brady. You can point to Matthew Stafford versus Joe Burrow. And you can get down to the NFC Championship, Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp out being better than Jimmy Garoppolo and what Jimmy Garoppolo can do. So the Seahawks, if they can't hope to win very many games by more than a touchdown, you would think. And when those games come down to it, is it going to be Geno Smith versus Matthew Stafford in the fourth quarter, Geno Smith versus Kyler Murray in the fourth quarter, Geno Smith versus, Tom Brady in the fourth quarter? The AFC West is on the schedule, so it's like Geno Smith versus Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, and Russell Wilson in the fourth quarter. That's where I'm like, wow, that is a vast separation, because as much as we can say what's good about the Seahawks, what's positive about the Seahawks, those teams are also making those same arguments right now. And so when you get comparative about it, it's like, that's rough. That's where I understand why people are like, get Baker Mayfield, because they believe Baker Mayfield can make those games happen, and I don't believe that. And I think there is no evidence of that. And if you separate, Baker Mayfield from his draft status and his Heisman Trophy and all that kind of stuff, that's where I don't see a quarterback who does that. Other people believe otherwise. That's fine. But I would still say that with Baker Mayfield, without Baker Mayfield, the quarterbacks on the Seahawks, the options on the Seahawks, the offensive line is inexperienced. The running backs are, also inexperienced or injured or whatever. We love Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, but as I'm seeing here, it's like it's a lot of wide receivers in the NFL to like.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's some of that, like you say, that is kind of a wash, But I think that one advantage we have is on offense is that we don't really know exactly where, like, one advantage we truly have is that Geno Smith doesn't have a heat map like Russell Wilson. So defenses can't come into the games, at least at the beginning of the year, and sort of decide, okay, we're not going to worry about this part of the field. We're not going to worry about that. We're not going to worry about, we know on third down, Russell struggles on third. Like, you just have kind of an open book. And that's where I saw good things from Geno last season. Like, I really saw, like, it was just more random as to how he went about his business. And I think that is ultimately, like, when you have somebody, when you have a quarterback for a decade, people are going to learn how to beat him, and we've seen, like, as much as credit Russell gets for stuff, like, he, Jimmy Garoppolo over the last 5 years was a much more successful quarterback when it came to playoff success and long-term success for the team. And I think that's where you kind of, like, have to question the quarterback driven league mentality kind of thing. It's like, well, yeah, there are, are you a great quarterback if you are capable of scoring points in the fourth quarter? Yeah, you're a great quarterback to some extent, but also, the only thing I don't like about people saying game manager is, like, how many other quarterbacks were game managers in the NFL? Literally, like, 90% of the history of quarterbacking has been game management,
I think it's just like that difference, though, of that's that separation we're looking for when we're talking about franchise quarterbacks. Is a franchise quarterback is you really curve the entire offense around his abilities and what he does, and in the case of Russell Wilson, I think there was that search to find how to best make the offense work for Russell Wilson, as opposed to Geno Smith or Drew Lock, where you're just going, like, please just run the plays. Please just do what the plays say. Take what you can get, like Jimmy Garoppolo, like Jared Goff. Like, and you can, I think the first half of Tom Brady's career was a game manager. The second half of Tom Brady's career, where he's won, 4 Super Bowls as well, is, more of a, this is the Tom Brady sort of, even then, like, Tom Brady is kind of like he's kind of like an elite game manager.
Yeah.
We know that, like, that's what he does, but Geno Smith is not necessarily a player who has been held back and should have been starting the last 8 years in the NFL.
I mean, I think he should have got a chance in New York when Eli was just crap, He was, like, you know what I mean? That was BS, but,
Yeah, you could be. Yeah, I think, like, there's that that could be true. I think there were issues with. I don't know exactly what caused it. He was sacked 10 times in his first 2 starts last year against the Steelers and Saints. So there was 10 sacks. That's too many, especially when you're losing by such small margins. And, I think the Saints have a phenomenally good defense. They were very good last year, and the Seahawks struggled in that game and scored 10 points. The Steelers have, TJ Watt and Dinka Fitzpatrick, and obviously have a very talented history of defense. And so those were tough matchups. And then when you got to the Jaguars, it's just very efficient. 20 of 24. It's like, just be very efficient. And that's very encouraging. It gives you a sign that Geno Smith is not a total waste of space out there as a quarterback, because we know that other guys can be. Other guys who have gotten the opportunity to start are much worse. I think it's very encouraging that he's going to his 4th season with the Seahawks. It's very encouraging that he's had so many years of learning, like, of being around the NFL, being around good quarterbacks, being around opportunities, and it is. Like I said in the newsletter not long ago, I'm rooting for Geno Smith, because Geno starting the whole season this year would be one of the best stories of the year. I mean, it's just like, wow, Geno Smith. It seems like not that long ago that he got punched and lost that competition against Ryan Fitzpatrick just because he got punched in the mouth. Why did that happen? The story may never really come out fully understood, but it's like that whole broken jaw that he got
The fact that you would think he's never going to play as a starter in the NFL again after the Jets had moved on, and here he is getting an opportunity. And it's kind of like a perfect storm of events because the Seahawks were in such a position that I think, I'm not better than anybody else. I'm not special, anything like that. I just happen to always be looking 2 or 3 years ahead in the draft. And to me, this is also what NFL teams would do. And they would be looking specifically a lot at the quarterbacks, of course. And to me, it was like so obvious. Like you could say this last year. You could say this in 2021. 2023 will be the year to get a quarterback, not 2022.
Yeah.
2020, 2022. And as soon as the Seahawks traded Russell Wilson, people were looking at that draft because they had not ever looked at the draft because either that's just usually when people start looking at the draft is after free agency, or because, it's like now all of a sudden there's this opening at quarterback that nobody knew was going to be there. And we're saying like Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, blah, 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 blah. And I think it was so obvious. This is a team that is trying to build a situation for a quarterback in the 2023 draft where you'll have 5 or 6 first-round talents. And this year there were maybe one, and the Steelers may have even reached on Kenny Pickett.
I think they reached on Pickett for sure.
For sure. It's just like, well, if there is a guy that you take there without getting totally wrecked on it, maybe it's Kenny Pickett because there just was no really great talent in the draft this year, and that's been obvious since last college season.
Yeah,
and also it was obvious last college season that the guys eligible for the following year were fantastic. So it's really a situation where Geno Smith gets to come into a place where they're like, hey, guess what? We're going to get rid of the starter. We're only going to bring in Drew Lock, and it's your chance again. Hopefully Shelby Harris doesn't punch you or something like that. So just stay out of punches, and you're going to maybe win this job, and it'll be a great story. But offensive ceiling, just comparatively speaking, there's just so much. You would have to think that Shane Waldron is a chess master who's just going to go out there and like think doink donk. And also the defense needs to play really well. Let's talk about the defense.
Baby.
The situation on defense. What I wrote in the newsletter today is I honestly thought I was going to be more optimistic about the defense, but it kind of goes back to what I also just said about the offense. At the end of the day, when you look at the Seahawks at their best, they had Russell Wilson at quarterback. They had Marshawn Lynch at running back. They had Doug Baldwin, very underrated league-wide. Obviously, Seahawks fans know how great Doug Baldwin was. Golden Tate. There's pieces there. Russell Okung. There's pieces there to be like, oh, wow, talent. On defense, once you take out Quandre Diggs, once you take out Jamal Adams and even be like, well, to what degree does Jamal Adams affect the play every day, every play? To what degree is he like he's not an Earl Thomas, he's not like, so once you take out the safeties, which to what degree is the ceiling of value of safeties, you're only talking about players who you hope are going to become great. And so to me, like that is the biggest issue right now with the defense is they lack that proven talent as opposed to in Seattle's best years, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Michael Bennett, Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, an exceptionally deep defensive line with Cliff Averill and Chris Clemens at one point playing together, and Al Woods was there for a while, but Tony McDaniel and Brandon Mebane and Clinton McDonald, like that team was so loaded. Byron Maxwell, like that you could say like that's a great defense. This team, we're looking at the starters: Shelby Harris, Darrell Taylor. Like you're going like, well, maybe Darrell Taylor is going to have 15 sacks, be that kind of guy. Maybe he is. Jordan Brooks. I don't think we're seeing Bobby Wagner, come out of the Jordan Brooks draft pick. Maybe he's going to be a very good linebacker, but do the Seahawks have a Bobby Wagner at linebacker? I don't see that. It's a lot of hope to me right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I do see a lot of potential with Jordan Brooks, though. I think you're also looking at a different kind of defense, right? Like, I think it's to be mentioned that, the way that we play defense changed the way that a lot of teams play offense in the NFL and how a lot of teams play defense in the NFL. So now we have to adjust once again. And I think that for me, Jordan Brooks maybe isn't Bobby Wagner, but Bobby was never as good in coverage as Jordan Brooks is, or can be. And
I mean, that's important.
Yeah, because I think that the way the NFL is changing, there is just more of an emphasis on the tight ends getting the ball, and certain routes that we used to not be able to cover. I mean, it used to be the thing, right? Like that second Super Bowl that we played in, the third Super Bowl technically that the Hawks played in, but the second one we played in with Russ and that era, that second half of the game where the Patriots came back, they just were throwing it over the middle, 10 yards, tight ends and short passes. And that's where we were vulnerable, but we could handle it. Like our defense could handle that because we weren't letting them throw the ball deep and we weren't letting them throw it to the edges as much, and we were able to sniff out screens a lot better. I think our the priorities have changed, the style of defense is going to change a lot. And that's what's exciting to me, like with Scott and Desai and Clint Hurt coming in. I mean, they're really interested in sort of a hybrid defense like that we've, it's not necessarily a man defense, right? Because Norton wanted to play a lot of zone, a lot more than we usually have played, and had all these funky rules, you know what I mean? Where, like, for instance, like I know they talk about it a lot on other podcasts, where like how people feel about Jamal Adams, where sometimes Jamal Adams gets criticism that's not fair, because ultimately he'll be in his position and somebody else won't be in their position, but it'll look like it's his fault, And so I think that this defense, and again, right, all my opinions are kind of, they lean on sort of an optimistic side, but I really do believe that scheme wise, we're looking at a team. It might take a year or two, but this team I think is going to be a lot better defensively.
Right. I'm just talking about like this year, it's like potentially this, that, and the other thing. But in the 2022 season, I mean, even Gus Bradley and Dan Quinn will tell you they wouldn't have been very successful without those players, without those great players.
And they blitzed a lot too. Both Bradley and Quinn like to blitz, which sort of can, make your defense look better. It can smooth over some of your rough edges because you get to the receiver or get to the quarterback. I think that was always the thing with Frank Clark. I was sad. I was sad when Clark got traded to one extent, but also I was happy that we were able to get something for him because Clark wasn't as well-rounded as a defensive player as we would hoped he would have been, And I think that shows in his play in Kansas City. He's not the best against the run. He's not very good in coverage. He does kind of freestyle sometimes. And I think that that's sort of where, you see, like, if the Chiefs didn't have Patrick Mahomes, how good would they really be? If they had Ryan Fitzpatrick, if they had Geno Smith, would they have gotten as far? Because Mahomes does, he does make up for things that your team doesn't do well. And I think that the Kansas City defense has been incredibly inconsistent over the last several years. And you're going to see, I think that's where I think if you can scheme better, if you can sort of, I mean, I'm really interested in this sort of zone man matchup thing that they got, right? Where they, with Desai and Hurt, they're trying to do what Alabama does, which is, recognize what your responsibilities are in the area that you need to cover, and then you choose the man to cover, right? So it's sort of a zone man kind of thing where you zone up to some extent, but then you're playing just one guy. And I think that's where we're going to see the team be successful, like maybe our talent is questionable. Like I agree with you, why do we Monet, Ford, Woods, Jefferson, Harris, Collier, are these guys, do they compare anything to the 2012, 2013, 2014 Hawks? Not necessarily, but at the
I mean,
same
no,
time, no.
not yeah. It's like it is such a, but yeah, that doesn't have to be the goal. I know what you're saying. Like, it doesn't have to
Right.
be the goal
It
right
doesn't
now
have
to
to
be
be the
the
goal.
best. I also just don't think that it's like the average, because if this is, you have to impact the passing game.
Right.
You have to be able to disrupt that quarterback, to get him off. And who's going to do that? Shelby Harris? I mean, like, Daryl Taylor, I'd love to see, something like that. We'll see, like, what's going to happen with Daryl Taylor. We'll see what happens with Boy Mafe. But again, comparatively to other rosters, they
Yeah.
have better pass rushers. They have better cornerbacks. Like, the Seahawks
Yeah.
have to figure out, how are the Seahawks going to stop Cooper Kupp? How are the Seahawks going to, stop Aaron Rodgers? How are the Seahawks going to stop Patrick Mahomes? How are they going to disrupt Patrick Mahomes? Because it just feels like when this defense goes up against the top 10 quarterbacks they face next year, the top 10 passing offenses they face next year, those are going to be difficult matchups unless Uchenna Nwosu is like going to be broken free in this new system, unless Daryl Taylor is going to break free, unless, and that's there's not really any interior pass rush to speak of with the Seahawks. You're talking about Artie Burns or Sidney Jones covering DeAndre Hopkins and Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams, and it's quite a heavy it's quite a task.
It's quite a task. I mean, like you said though too, like, what do we need? What are the goals for this year? I mean, I think 7-9 would be a great accomplishment. And
8-9.
Oh, 8-9, yeah.
10.
Yeah, I hate the whole 17 game.
Well, it'll be 18 soon enough.
Oh my God. Yeah, what are the goals this year? I mean, I just think getting one step better. You're in a new era. You have new coaching staff. I don't think Desai and Hurt and Carl Scott, none of these guys are about to leave. They all, according to multiple articles that I've read, they all sought out Pete Carroll. So in terms of that question of who's in charge, who was the most respected, Wilson or Carroll, who do these players believe in, right? We touched on it earlier. Quandre Diggs could have easily said, "I'm not signing again. I hate you, Pete Carroll. I'm so mad at you," like getting mad like at his dad or something. Like these players believe in each other, and that's, I think, more important than anything. I'm very concerned about the linebackers. I don't really know about Cody Barton. I don't really know. I like Jordan Brooks a lot, but I don't. But Bobby Wagner. I mean, football is American football is such a team sport. It is not. There is very, very much about. There's a lot about American football that is team oriented. Like you were mentioning, the defense, the interior linemen for the Hawks back in the day in our golden years, in the early 2010s. Like, yeah, those guys were great players, but also they were great players that were bolstered by cornerbacks that were absolutely blanketing receivers and tight ends, and that plays a huge role. I mean, look at Joe Burrows and the Bengals last year. Their offensive line was absolutely trash, especially towards the end of the season. And what Burrows did was just got the ball to one of his incredibly talented players. Like Jamar Chase was constantly creating separation. You know what I mean? So even I think in a team sport like football, you can take advantage of certain matchups. You can take advantage of certain opportunities where Jamar Chase is beating his cornerback, beating the coverage almost every time, and you can get him the ball. But at the same time, ultimately, you're not going to win on a consistent basis with sort of a disjointed, team. Otherwise, the Bengals would not have fixed their offensive line. I know my brother Chris, he watches our podcast and he tells me not to use so many baseball references, but I think baseball is such an interesting comparison in the sense that you have team outcomes in baseball, but it is ultimately baseball comes down to an individual moment, the pitcher versus the batter. And with football, you just have such a different reality where, yeah, you can have your DK Metcalfs and you can have your, Jamal Adams and stuff like that. But ultimately, all those players are only going to be bolstered by, what the rest of the team does, and the decisions the rest of the team makes, and that's what I agree with you. Like when you were going down the list here, and I'm looking at the depth chart, and I came into this like, oh my God, I'm really excited for the defense. At the same time, I kind of got sad because you're right. Our depth is kind of got a ton of question marks. Why did we sign certain players to extensions? But
yeah.
I
think that just to wrap this up, and then we're going to get out of here. But when you asked sort of like, what's the goal for the season? I think it's the Miami Dolphins. It's like you want to be the Miami Dolphins last year. They started 1-7. They won 8 of their last 9 games.
Yeah.
They swept the Patriots. They beat the Saints. They beat a few. They beat the Ravens. They beat a couple good teams. They beat a few bad teams. They come out of that feeling like good about Jalen Waddle. They come out of that good about Jalen Phillips. They come out feeling good about Javon Holland. So they've got the players that are young and up and coming, and they're like, oh, we've got something here. There's a lot of talk that if the Dolphins don't believe that Tua is the guy, that next year the Miami Dolphins will be the Denver Broncos or the LA Rams, and they'll be the ones wooing the next quarterback to move teams, whether that's Tom Brady or somebody else. They'll be, or Lamar Jackson or whatever, they'll be the team that is a landing spot for that next quarterback. So I think that the goal here for the Seahawks is going to be come out of this feeling like we're not a shitty team. We've got players that we like, where we're going like, look at Tariq Woolen, look at Darrell Taylor, Boy Mafe, Jordan Brooks, solid players up and coming. Look at, Charles Cross, which I think ultimately a year from or going after looking into like next February, I think that the Seahawks will feel very good about Charles Cross. I think they'll feel very good about Ken Walker. I think they'll feel very good about, obviously, I think DK Metcalf will be signed for an extension. He'll be signed to an extension this year. So I think they'll feel very good about that. They'll have Quandre Diggs under contract, so it's like, even though it wasn't this year, I think Quandre Diggs will be around. I think Jamal Adams will be around. I think they'll feel pretty good about one of the cornerbacks that they drafted. I think that they'll feel good about one of the pass rushers that they drafted, whether that's Boy Mafe or Tyreek Smith. I think that there will be things to come away feeling positive about Seattle. They'll have their $50 million in cap space, with which they don't really have a ton of people to even re-sign at that point next year going into free agency. It'll be a little bit less because, like I said, they'll extend DK Metcalf, and that's the goal. I think that realistically, my very, I think, fair projection is that this is a 5-12 team, to be honest. And I think like that is based on, just the fact that they don't really have a top 10 team on offense. They don't have a top 10 team on defense. They're going to have to be better than the Falcons and the Jets and the Giants and the really bad teams that they face. We've also seen that the Seahawks will flop against bad teams, which is not encouraging when you're going to have to also face Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Tom Brady or whatever, and some of the best players in this league and some good teams. So I think 5-12 is kind of my maybe I would even say like closer to the floor, So I think like that's closer to the floor, 5-12, and I think maybe the ceiling is in that 7-10, 8-9 area. Maybe 9-8 is possible. Like I said, if your goal is to be like similar to the Dolphins, but I think that the schedule against the NFC West and the AFC West, you get reprieves against the Panthers and the Falcons, But even the Saints have a phenomenal defense. Like
Yeah.
I said, I think they're very encouraged to be where the Saints are at on defense. You gotta beat teams like the Jets. You gotta beat teams like the Giants. You gotta take advantage of the last place teams that you face. But other than that, like I see the Seahawks. You gotta beat the Lions. I see the teams where it's like that 5-12 to 8-9 range to me is like very fair for where this team is at, and I think should not be discouraging, to the Seahawks fans out there necessarily, because it's not about 2022, it's about 2023. It's about like getting better, not focusing so much on the win-loss record. If you focus so much on the win-loss record, you're going to find yourself saying fire Pete Carroll when the team is 2-6 or whatever, and that's not the right thing to do. That's not the right way to go with this thing. The only way to fire Pete Carroll and to really start over is if the team is dysfunctional and falling apart and off the same page, and Charles Cross sucks, and Ken Walker tears his ACL or whatever, which I'm sorry I even said that, but I put it out there. I'm sorry I even said that.
That's your boy. Come on now.
Ken Walker's going to be fine. But like, I think ultimately I just see like 5-12, 6-11. And I don't think that is I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. They were just 7-10, and we survived, and 31 teams will not win the Super Bowl. So, I think it's okay. If the Seahawks surprise and shock and everything, like, then that to me, like, if the Seahawks shock, that's like 10-7. Like, holy shit, that's shocking. That's like another team going 16-1.
Right, and I think
10-7.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like, I think that especially with the NFL, how many times do we go into a season thinking that a team is going to do one thing and then just something happens, like a player meant more to a team than we expected, and then our opponent's defense is not as good, or a player just doesn't produce like he did the season previous. I mean, the Rams to me are a, you probably know this better than me, but I feel like the Rams are kind of always on the precipice at this point of being middling or horrible, only because they have so much weight, they have so much they're so top heavy, they don't have a lot of depth. Wagner,
they have a really bad situation. If anything, if they had to go to a backup quarterback, it would be.
If they had to go to a backup quarterback. If Cooper Kupp got hurt, their running back situation turned out okay last year, but that took a lot of finagling, So I think just as any team in the NFL is, as much as we sit here and say the Seahawks, we don't really know how they're going to, how everything's going to turn out. They have a lot to prove. I think the same can be said for every team. I mean, if you think about the 6 games we play in division, there's a good chance that Trey Lance completely, he'll be very inconsistent at best, right? He's going to be inconsistent at best. So there's a chance we can sweep the 49ers. There's a chance that with a good attitude and just a new team wanting to prove something, that we go 1-1 against the Rams. And I don't think we beat them in St. Louis, in Los Angeles. But there's a good chance we can go 1-1. And the Cardinals to me are just like the most, like, they're like a hot teenager, like they're like good one day, terrible the next. Like, they're just like, where is your future? Where is your focus? You know what I mean? Like, they're just like an intelligent, like attractive teenager, like with a nice car. Like, are you going to crash the car, or are you going to show up on time and pick up your friends and go out and have a good time? I mean, so there's a good chance that we win at least 3 games in division. And then if we win 3 games in division, that's 11 remaining games. I don't see us only winning 2 of 11 of those next games. There's a good chance 7 or 8 wins is realistic. And on top of that, you have a lot of players that want to prove themselves, a lot of players that are upset with Russell Wilson. And if anybody we talk about Russell Wilson so much. I mean, he's just going to be the ex that we talk about too much. Like, we're going to be on a date and we're going to be like, oh, my ex, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, I'm tired of hearing about your ex. At the same time, the dude constantly puts himself in the conversation. I mean, what did he say a few days ago? I wanted to come to Denver because I wanted to come to an organization that knew how to win. I mean, get out of town, dude. Get out of town, straight out of town. You're such a jerk. This is one of the best organizations in football, and that's recognized by multiple players, multiple coaches, multiple executives. People have started drafting like John Schneider. As much as people want to talk crap on Schneider's drafts, how many teams are doing the whole wild card draft thing now? Oh, this guy, I'm going to pick this guy. We're a respected team. How, and if you're, I mean, just imagine if somebody was saying that about you, Kenny, you know what I mean? Like, oh man, the, Turf Show Times, what a crap blog. You know what I mean? Those guys don't even put any effort into it, blah, blah, blah. Like, everybody.
I remember when I definitely, that's how I was treated by people like Charles McDonald when I took over field goals of the Yahoo Sports 4 Verts guy. Very on Twitter and field goals sucks now. So yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, and it's going to give you motivation. It's going to give the people that you work with, even if it's not, like we said, chip on your shoulder. It doesn't have to be there every day, but think about all the players on the Seahawks that, and this is just speculation, but we're also talking about the human element. How many players on this team are like, screw you, Russ? How many players are going to want to be good just because they know they have something to prove? And
well, there's also a lot of new players. It's like Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, Ken Walker, Noah Fant. None of those guys know who Russell Wilson is.
No, but it's been proven multiple times. Like, Jonathan Taylor was the most frustrating thing to me. Jonathan Taylor was being interviewed before he got drafted, and he's literally like, I want to play for the Seahawks. Cross, so excited to be a Seahawk. He said he was. He only got one call from the Seahawks. The Seahawks are really good about masking who they want to draft. It's one of the reasons all this Baker Mayfield, Malik Willis stuff happened in the first place, because the Seahawks play it very, very close to the chest. So even when they do confirm or deny players that they like, they do say, oh yeah, like, of course they're not going to lie. Yeah, I like Malik Willis. And then somebody takes that information. They go, sources say Seahawks are into Malik Willis. They're going to draft him in the first round or the second round. No, they just said they like the dude. That's all they said. So they're not going to lie about it there. Abe Lucas, super excited to be a Seahawk. Kobe Bryant said he was super excited to be a Seahawk. And Ken Norton got fired. One of the reasons that he got fired was because he was unwilling to play young players. And again, as much as people want to talk crap on Pete Carroll, that, Pete Carroll, doesn't give these guys autonomy. Look at the way the defenses were run previous to Ken Norton. Constantly, the Seahawks played young players and rookies, and I think that's a huge reason why Carroll fired Norton. And you're gonna have these players, these young players. They know that LJ Collier knows he's got something to prove. Alton Robinson isn't gonna be given these inconsistent snaps. You know what I mean? He's gonna be given consistent snaps.
I love your outlook on life. I love your optimism. I don't know how you expect. I mean, the 49ers dragged Jimmy Garoppolo on the brink of the Super Bowl. That was one of the worst quarterbacks. He's not even a start. Nobody wants Jimmy Garoppolo at all. And the 49ers almost won the Super. I mean, they would have had a very good chance to beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl, because Trent Williams is maybe the best tackle in the NFL. George Kittle is the best tight end in the NFL. The Seahawks have won a bunch of games against the 49ers. God bless them. Great. That's fantastic. But that is such a better – Nick Bosa is better than anybody on the Seahawks right now, today, other than, I mean, it's just like Nick Bosa is a phenomenal player. George Kittle is a phenomenal player. Trent Williams is a phenomenal player. If Deebo Samuel wants to play there and he stays healthy, he's a phenomenal player.
Yeah.
The 49ers are – I mean, the Seahawks would dream to go 2-0 against the 49ers this season with the way they're set up. I mean, that I can even just picture it now, like the Seahawks going against the 49ers that first time. I mean, we'll just go in with like a bunch of like optimism, hope, and maybe for like 3.5 quarters, struggle, bite, tooth and nail, keep it through there. But that is such a more talented team than the Seahawks. I mean, that is such a more talented team than the Seahawks right now. And that I know that is like difficult to like accept when the Seahawks have been so much better for so long. But this is a different situation. This is a different time. The Rams just won the Super Bowl, and the Seahawks can't beat them anyway. When they were at their best, they couldn't beat the Rams. Yeah. So Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Floyd, like Bobby Wagner, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, Allen Robinson, the Rams and the 49ers, that is an 0-4 to me unless the Seahawks prove otherwise. And then you got to beat the Cardinals, who were also 11-6 last year. And I mean, like, if Kyler Murray, as much as Kyler Murray looked like shit without DeAndre Hopkins, he's still a very talented young player. They added Hollywood Brown. I love the trajectory that Rondale Moore is on. They still have DeAndre Hopkins for one of those 2 games. AJ Green, a very good offensive line, an underrated defense.
Yeah,
Buda Baker, Byron Murphy. That is J.J. Watt. Like, I appreciate your optimism. I love it. I love that you want that. I love that you believe in that. I love that you could see a 4-2 or 3-3 record in the NFC West. To me, it's like 2-4 is the ceiling. And then you go against the AFC West. Other than the fact that the Broncos in week 1, it's like the most ideal time to face the Broncos.
I agree 100%.
Other than that, like the Chiefs, the Chargers. I mean, these are 2 teams that should be in the top 5 to win the Super Bowl next season. The Raiders, I think are being overrated. But other than that, like, still, what is the answer for Devontae Adams? What is the answer for Hunter Renfrow and Devontae Adams? And, like, it's just going to be – and Josh McDaniels planning all that out. I get it. Like, other than the fact that the Seahawks get to play the Bucs in Germany and then like kind of like have that little throw off there, what is the hope to beat the Bucs outside of that? To me, I just see like committing this schedule to memory. It's like the Panthers, the Falcons are bad, the Jets are bad, the Lions are bad, the Giants are bad, and then outside of that, you've got maybe the Cardinals. You got the Cardinals and the 49ers and the Rams twice. If you come out of that with 2 wins, that's great. And then the AFC West, if you come out of that with 1 win or maybe at the most 2, then that's that. And that's where I get 5 to 7 wins. And I think and then a lot can happen. A lot can change. Maybe Tom Brady doesn't misses 14 games. That could happen. Maybe Zach Wilson is trash, like everybody else is saying. Maybe the Raiders thing is a complete dysfunctional nightmare, and Josh McDaniels is as bad as he was with the Broncos. Yeah. Maybe Russell Wilson is a dysfunctional nightmare. Maybe that whole first season goes horribly. We don't know anything about Nathaniel Hackett, the new head coach. I get that's like the optimistic angle, but I guess like what I see is, the Seahawks it's just going to be a tougher road this year because I don't know how you match up optimistically with Trent Williams, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Kyle Shanahan's rushing attack, all that kind of stuff. Because even if Trey Lance is bad, so is Jimmy Garoppolo. They could only really get better. In my estimation, they could only
I just
really
think
get
his
better
inconsistency. But would you say that Russell Wilson was the only difference between us beating the 40? Because we have a great record against the 49ers, right? Over the last 5 or 6 years.
I think that that is such a it's not that he's the only difference.
Right.
It's that you're going from, say, the 8th best quarterback in the NFL to the 32nd. It's a monumental difference between what is happening because the Seahawks didn't go out and, if this year's draft class was next year's draft class and the Seahawks, picked Justin Herbert type of player, then maybe the drop wouldn't be so dramatic.
Right.
It's just such a different that all of a sudden now, because the Seahawks don't have any advantage at quarterback when they go up against the team, you have to start going like, well, shit, like what are we comparing here? Trent Williams to Charles Cross, George Kittle to Will Disley. And I obviously like the receivers can match up well when you're talking about Debo and Ayuk, Metcalf and Lockett. But then like, what about Debo versus Artie Burns? What about George Kittle, versus Cody Barton? What about the Seahawks getting like, I think that when they match up, it's going to be, well, DK Metcalf is being covered by Jalen Ramsey, who has a very good track record against DK Metcalf so far with Russell Wilson throwing him the ball. What about when you've got Tyler Lockett against, Tyler Lockett's great. I was trying to think of like names of players that are good out there that they'll be facing, like shutdown cornerback everywhere. But like, and then on the other side of the ball, it's just like the matchups don't look as good when all of a sudden you have such a disadvantage at quarterback. The Seahawks have won 15 of their last 17 against the 49ers, but that was with Russell Wilson. That was with, if we're talking about 15 of 17, if we're going back that far, that's with Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Mike Bennett. That's not the situation that the Seahawks are in today. Today, the Seahawks have to figure out, how's that going to look when Jake Curhan is assigned Nick Bosa? How's that going to look now when, instead of Bobby Wagner, being the guy that's calling the defense in the middle of the field while you're matching up against Jimmy Garoppolo or whatever. Now you've got Cody Barton and Jordan Brooks and mashed up in the middle against, George Kittle and Kyler Murray and Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady and like this endless list: Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson. It's over and over and over again where I'm just going, realistically, the matchups just don't start to look as good, where it's like, look, the 49ers, they just almost won the Super Bowl. I mean, they almost just went to the Super Bowl, and I think, obviously that's pretty close to almost winning it. But that was in large thanks to the fact that they could get, as a wild card team, they only went 10-7, so in the regular season you could say, hey, look, if the Seahawks if there was never a Russell Wilson injury last year, the Seahawks might have been in the playoffs instead of the 49ers. But they traded Russell Wilson. They cut Bobby Wagner. They've moved on from a lot of what they were attached to as a better team. And it is a moment now where you go, let's find out what we have without those guys. Let's find out what happens when more of the onus is on the play calling and development, all that kind of stuff. And I hope that they develop, well. But this is a process that'll take several drafts. And then you also always have to get lucky in those drafts. It'll be great if Boy Mafe comes out of this, looking phenomenal. But it also takes a lot of top 10 picks. A lot of these guys that I'm naming, like Trent Williams or Nick Bosa, were very, very highly rated prospects that took a while to get to, the 49ers. And Nick Bosa was fantastic immediately. So that's why I'm kind of like always looking for these guys who pop off the page immediately. I think Darrell Taylor, when you take into account that he missed his whole, rookie season and everything when he came out last year, very encouraging. It's very encouraging the way that he played, and that with a new defensive coordinator who may put him in a better position to make those splash plays, fantastic. But ultimately the matchups to me against the 49ers would be frightening. Against the Rams should be frightening. You're talking about Aaron Donald versus Austin Blythe and Damian Lewis and Gabe Jackson. Aaron Donald is the best player in the NFL. You're talking about Jalen Ramsey against, your top receiver. That's what I always look at often when teams are matching up and I'm trying to preview a game is like, if you've got a phenomenal receiver, I think like what happens when that guy gets taken out of the game, if that's what's going to be the case. If you've got a shutdown cornerback, what does your offense look like without that guy? So what does Geno Smith look like because he looked great when he was throwing the ball to DK Metcalf last year. what's he going to look like when he can't have that, when he can't do that? That's the big thing, is that I just don't think the Seahawks match up as well. And in the NFC West, I think it's going to be a tough road. And they definitely, if they want to come out of that with a 3-3 record, sweep the Cardinals, find that out. Because as you say, it's kind of like it could be an if this or that team. It could be, I would not be shocked to see the Cardinals with a top 5 pick next year. I would not be even shocked to see the 49ers with a top 5 pick. Okay. I mean, look, you got me there, because with Kyle Shanahan every other year, they do have a top 5 pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I get you. I guess, yeah, I can see where it's like, yeah, maybe those teams aren't as good as they looked last season, but just judging it the way that I can right now in the middle of the offseason, I don't see Trent Williams, George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel matching up very well, and they got very close last year with a guy that nobody wants at quarterback. So it's kind of like, to me, Trey Lance almost is by default an upgrade to Jimmy Garoppolo, because he does have at least some skills there that you could see working out immediately.
And Garoppolo was hurt too last year. That's another reason nobody's really picked up on him. He isn't necessarily a desired quarterback, but he's still hurt. He has shoulder problems.
I think that's a misnomer with Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield. This whole idea that teams are waiting because they're hurt. Teams don't have rationality when it comes to real quarterbacks. They don't play in a rational world when it comes to quarterbacks that they really – the Browns traded 3 first-round picks and gave $230 million to a guy who we don't know if he'll ever play in the league again. It's like it's a whole crazy situation with Deshaun Watson, but the Browns were like, I don't care, do it. Because they don't do rational shit when they actually need when they believe in a quarterback. These teams do not believe in Jimmy Garoppolo or Baker Mayfield. Otherwise, they would have done something irrational. There's too many teams out there. There's too many GMs that do stupid shit. Every year, there's 5 or 6 GMs that are basically losing their jobs. So they would do something. The Panthers would have already done something irrational with Baker Mayfield if they believed he was a real quarterback to start for them, because they were the team that signed Teddy Bridgewater to a contract that was that was way over what he was worth. They were the team that traded a 2nd and a 3rd round pick or whatever for Sam Darnold. They were the team that's done all this dumb shit. And if they're still going to continue, and they still seem like a team willing to do dumb shit at quarterback. So it's like any team that would have believed at all in Jimmy Garoppolo or Baker Mayfield would have already done something stupid to do that and to make that reach. It doesn't matter about their shoulder. It's like Drew Brees was a free agent in 2006, and he had a torn labrum issue that people were talking about. We don't know if he'll ever play in the NFL and all that kind of stuff. And it scared the Dolphins and the Chargers away from making that deal. Fair enough, but the Saints still came in and gave him a big contract, and we saw what happened. But it's like any team would have been like, oh, shit, Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe they would even be like, oh, he's kind of like at a discount right now. Let's get him while other teams are scared off. Yeah. I think it's so obvious when you watch Jimmy Garoppolo how bad he is, and anything else when people are judging it off of playoff wins or he had a nice passer rating. Just watch him play. There's nothing special there. There's nothing special with him or Baker Mayfield. So that's it's like coming full circle here. I don't believe that the shoulders are what are holding these guys back from becoming starters elsewhere. Right. I just don't think they are considered starters.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes back to what you and I have talked about before. I think ultimately the Seahawks not making these choices, the Seahawks not, going with Mayfield or kind of throwing the money there. I mean, what we're talking about, I think part of my optimism is win based. I also think that with the extra playoff spot, if a team is close, now, back in the day when it was 16 games, 7-9, right? When we got in at 7-9, that was a huge deal. And that did add kind of momentum, and it pushed our team to coalesce, and and like you said, the Marshawn Lynch run, Beastquake, all those things help propel our team forward. Now you're talking about an extra playoff spot. So it's very likely that we might even be in a position, even if we are, if we have 5 or 6 wins at some point towards the end of the season, maybe we get a couple extra wins and hit the 8-win mark because were extra motivated, but I think ultimately what's really reassuring about the way that they've gone about this stuff is that they haven't sold out to any one idea or the other. They're basically saying, let's see how this goes. It's not a tank year. Because I think if you tank, right, like you said, it doesn't, like, especially in the NFL, how many teams have we seen? Like, look at the Texans. Like, they were tanking, and then they gave David Mills the keys to the car at the end of the season. They end up playing well, and they kind of win their way out of the number one spot, right? I mean, this stuff happens, and even if we went 3-14 and we tanked, like some people want to say, I mean, somebody might get fired, something bad might happen. Like, people's attitude changes. Maybe Desai and Carl Scott say, hey, I'm out of here. They already had plenty of offers from other people. I mean, but ultimately, I think, to me, a successful season is going to be an improved defense, and an improved defense will also come from a more balanced offense that gives the defense time to rest and get some first down so they don't have to freaking play 1,000 plays every game, and I think that scheme wise, like you said, like you were talking specifically about the matchups, and those are important, and you're right to have those concerns, but at the same time, like individual matchups, we could find success. Kenneth Walker, if you have a good running game, Kenneth Walker he might in a perfect world, he's an MVP candidate. You know what I mean? Because he turns us into a team that, if you run well in the NFL, you have a chance to win. Just like if you have a pass rush, right? That's why everybody wants a pass rush. If you can have a great pass rush, but the rest of your defense is mediocre, you got a chance to win. So there might be these little things, right? DK is going to go. I know
that you're optimistic because you just said Ken Walker is an MVP candidate.
Well, he could be.
But Jonathan Taylor was like 1,000-yard back as a rookie. Derrick Henry didn't, he was like obviously in a shared situation. We have to give running backs a little bit more credit for like needing a year to like really grow into this league. This whole plug and play thing and like they just, I know you're not saying that exactly, but like,
yeah,
Ken Walker, yeah, I'm optimistic. I great. That's like all that kind of stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, if I go down the list and say like, I agree. A team in the NFC will make the playoffs at 8 and 9. Like I think a wild card 8-9 because there's only like 3 good teams in the NFC that are like really like locked in. I think at this point, the Packers number 1, the Rams are number 2, the Bucs are number 3, and then it's kind of like a mishmash. We'll see if the Cowboys can step up for 2 years in a row. It never happens, but we'll see that. But once you get down to it, it's like just like fair. I think it's just fair game to say that like Eagles and like the Vikings and the Saints and the 49ers and the Cardinals are among the teams that the Seahawks need to start climbing over, and we'll see what happens when the season starts. But there's optimism, there's realism, there's pessimism. I'm really trying to stay in the lane of like realism, and I think like just a very realistic view of the Seahawks is I think they were about, everybody agree. I've never met a Seahawks fan who says that the last 3 or 4 years were any fun at all. Like they don't like the team at all. And that was with Russell Wilson. So if you really think Russell Wilson was like a very talented quarterback, which I think we can also all agree on, you take that off of the team. If you really think Bobby Wagner was a very like talented player who yes, he had his struggles in coverage, but still did a lot of great things, he's not on the team anymore. If the Seahawks aren't worse than that, if they aren't worse after that, I mean, I guess I just don't understand anything about, the game. Because you think like a lot of, guys might feel relief that there's a change, there's a change and Russell Wilson, and it's like they're trying to prove something and they have goals and they want to do well. It's great. Every team wants to do well. Every team wants to come in and have a good season. The talent just isn't there at this point, at this moment, unless it's unrealized talent. Unless you're coming out of there going like, oh my God, Boy Mafe is the steal of the year. I haven't heard anything like that, but it's like this is like going to have to be a monumental situation. This is not like the Bengals, because the Bengals, they already had a lot of, I think like the Bengals is interesting because first of all, they have Joe Burrow. I mean, like there is no Joe Burrow on the Seahawks. If you go like look at the other turnarounds that have happened, like the Rams, the Seahawks don't have the Rams, 99 Rams. They're not the 99 Rams. It's like there's a lot of other things that would have to go. And I know like now I'm like reaching like very new heights and everything, but I think it's just like very realistic that we go down the list of teams that the Seahawks are in this bucket with the Falcons and the Panthers and the Lions and the Bears and Washington and the Giants. And in that bucket of teams, one or two will surprise and will emerge. And hey, look, the Seahawks have Pete Carroll, and they have like a really good, they have some really nice veteran leaders, and they have some really interesting young players.
Yeah,
I think a very positive season is going. I think it's a very positive season if you go 6-11.
Yeah,
honestly, I think it is a very positive season if the Seahawks go 6-11. But I think at the same time, go back to 2011 when there was positive momentum going on. You also had what some people cite as the worst Seahawks performance of all time in that loss to the Browns, where it was like the Leon Washington punt return was called back and everything.
Yeah.
Where you're just going to go there some weeks going, fuck, this like is really hard to watch.
What was the score to that game? Was it 9-6?
9-6.
Yeah.
and I think it's like you're going to come out of this going like, the thing is, I don't think that I've ever seen a team I want to watch or less than like this right now. Falcons. Like I think the Falcons to me, I like look at that Falcons team and I just see garbage all over. And I know no Falcons are watching this, so that's fine. But it's just like I look at that and I'm like, ugh. You're starting Marcus Mariota at quarterback. You've got no wide receivers. Kyle Pitts and Drake London are very enticing. But I think like a Falcons fan coming off of a 7-10 season, trading Matt Ryan, a Falcons fan could sit here and make the exact same arguments that you're making for the Seahawks and have that same amount of optimism because they'll go like Marcus Mariota's getting his second shot. And I think, Kyle Pitts is going into year 2. And
okay.
Watch, there's some things that go on here. Like for real though, like I think there's a lot of parallels to be made between the Seahawks and the Falcons in their current situation. What's exciting is the Seahawks have 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks next year.
Yeah. Yes.
So there is like a lot of momentum for the future. I would be optimistic about the future.
And they did, and we talked about this last time. Part of my optimism is the things they didn't do. We talked about this last time. They didn't go all in on a quarterback. They didn't mess up their team. If they go 6-11, they're still in a great position. They got tons of picks. And it also shows that they're willing to wait a little bit, Like tanking is not a choice. It's not a thing they're going to do. So play hard, have a good attitude,
I want to address this. 6-11. See, this is what I mean. Like, Reflect the Sun. Good to have you back. Thanks for always joining.
With the Tina Turner picture there.
6-11. Seaside Joe equals Debbie Downer. Now, this is what I want to address right now. If the Seahawks go 6-11, am I a Debbie Downer at the end of the year, or am I just a guy that said what I believed what was going to happen and it happened? Am I a Debbie Downer, or am I just trying to tell you the reality that I see? It's like, and I'm not like mad at you for saying that. I appreciate that you said that. It's just like saying like, I'm trying to give up. That's all I'm ever trying to do in my entire career is give you what I see. And the Seahawks, and then people will go, it's like if you looked at my record, you go like, well, no, you're always optimistic. The Seahawks were always good, in the entire time that I've covered them. I started in 2011. So it's like, other than that 2011 season where there were like positive things happening, and I was like, I think there's something really exciting here happening with the way that Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas are like kind of excited. I remember the game against the Eagles. They beat the Eagles. There was something so exciting. There was this energy. And it was like the Seahawks aren't a good team right now, but if they get a quarterback in place, they'll be good. So that 2011 season is pretty much the 2022 season if all goes well. Which means that they will not make the playoffs. They will not be that good of a team. But you should feel an energy and excitement and some momentum building with these guys. So I'm going to keep coming out here every week saying that the Seahawks are a mediocre team. And if that's really bothers them, then it's going to bother people. But that is just what I'm always, always, always done. with my coverage. I just call it like I see it. The Seahawks used to make it very easy because they were always good. That's just calling it like I see it. So that's where I'm at, like, in terms of the ceiling for the Seahawks is like their ceiling is 7 or 8 wins. I mean, that would be amazing. Imagine the story if Geno Smith wins 8 games, I mean, imagine the story of Drew Lock, even like give something. But I'm not being pessimistic at all. I'm not being a Debbie Downer whatsoever. I'm trying to like just talk about, and I know I'm talking to the comment, not to you. But yeah, I love you. It's good to disagree. It's good to have different looks at it because I'm going to be wrong about a lot. I mean, I'm probably going to be wrong about the Jets, but I'm still going to stick with it. I might be wrong about Grayson McCall, but I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah, and I think again it goes back to the, they don't have to be very good this year. They don't have to win-wise. They don't have to be great this year. I think the most important thing on this team, for me as a Seahawks fan, for us as Seahawks fans, everybody going into it with all these wild opinions about what's going to happen, I think that that just is indicative of, what any team, what any fan base would go through when your number one most highly rated player is traded. You're going to just have this wide scope of, and then that player's position not being replaced, right? So you're just going to have this wide range of opinions, which I think is fine. But that's, to me, what is so exciting and so fun about this year is that we're going to find out lots of things. We're going to get the answers to a lot of questions, like how good is Jamal Adams? Is he really good enough to alter defense, to lift the defense up as much as we think he might? Is how good is DK Metcalf? How, if he's more of a focal point, if how good is Waldron? Like you said, how good are Waldron and Dickerson? Will the magic from the end of last season from the rushing, in terms of the rushing game, how much is that going to carry over? To me, those are all very, very exciting questions, and they're things that we haven't really focused on, mainly because we've had a number one quarterback, or at least a franchise quarterback, and ultimately, like anybody that's going to pontificate on the season or make predictions, you're going to say, like you said, oh, the Seahawks have always been kind of good, so you've always sort of made these positive, optimistic predictions. But ultimately, like with Russell Wilson, we've seen that in the playoffs, he just doesn't really have it, and it doesn't work out for whatever reason, whether it's because they can't agree on the scheme or because Russell's so focused on throwing the ball downfield or whatever it ends up being. But nobody really gave a prediction about the Seahawks. Well, some people did, but it wasn't really a majority opinion that the Seahawks were a good team, but they weren't going to win in the playoffs. Some people did give that opinion, but if that was the case, if somebody was going to be a diehard journalist and be like, hey, Seahawks are going to win 12 games next year, but guess what? They're still going to suck. So let's get rid of Russell sooner rather than later. Let's not sign him to an extension, whatever. I mean, those are the questions. Very bad. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to. But
I was just going to say,
talking on that about Russell Wilson, though, it's like it's very bad for his resume that he never got to an NFC Championship again. Because after the defense wasn't the best in the NFL, he could not be better than Aaron Rodgers head to head. He could not be better than Cam Newton head to head. He could not be better than any of these guys and never get that deep in the playoffs. And like I said, this is a game that's quarterback-driven league, so it's very bad for his resume.
Yeah, it's bad. And you look at, the Packers game when we lost, or when we got to the Super Bowl, what was that, 2014?
Yeah.
He shouldn't have won that game. We shouldn't have won that game. The next season we get to the playoffs. We play the Panthers, and Russell Wilson fumbles the ball.
Nearly lost the week before against the Vikings.
Clearly lost the week before. I mean, clearly, the Rams game last year, I mean, it was, I don't really fault Jamal Adams, or not last year, but the year before, when we beat the Rams at home and then we played them in the playoffs and they beat the crap out of us. Like, I don't fault Jamal Adams. Like, he was really excited and was sounding really cocky after we won the division a couple years ago. And he was smoking a cigar and everything. I don't fault him because he spent his whole life, besides his college career, his NFL career was trash as far as the teams he was on. But I do fault somebody like Russell Wilson to not be prepared to play the Rams the next week in the same building, and you should have beat them. That should have been the goal. It should have been, we're going to win the 2 games in a row against the Rams, and this is how it's going to happen. And if you're a quarterback and you're a leader, you're going to say, here's how it's going to go. We haven't upgraded our quarterback. We haven't gotten the same kind of quarterback. But again, I think NFL is so matchup oriented that, if to upset my brother once again, like if you want to make an analogy, a baseball analogy, you look at like somebody like Clayton Kershaw, who for whatever reason, he's had some good games in the playoffs, but he's also had some bad games. And most of the time, what ends up happening in those situations is that the hitters are basically sitting on one pitch or another, and they're going to take that pitch. And I think that's the same kind of thing with Russell. Was we're going to see, this is again why I think it's exciting. We're going to see how much of an impact Russell Wilson's lack of flexibility, lack of willingness, like his unwillingness to follow the game plan. We're going to see what kind of impact that makes on this team,
It's going to be better, and then we're going to get out of here. But it's going to be, I think it's just going to be better when the next quarterback in 2023 enters, to have that sort of feeling of like, we're building this team for this guy. All these players are here in place for this guy, and like it's going to be built around this guy, whoever that ends up being. And I think it's so funny to me. Warren Sharp of Sharp Football put out this really odd tweet yesterday about the Seahawks, where he said the Seahawks are all backwards in how they build. Their pay and everything. Where it's like they're top 5 in paying running and their running back salary cap, but they're 29th in offensive line and third and 29th in quarterback and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I thought that what we were all talking about with how to smartly build a football team was get cheap at quarterback. Like get a quarterback on a rookie contract like Joe Burrow. Like Matthew Stafford, even what the Rams pay Matthew Stafford is like 15th or 16th in the NFL for salary cap, because up until his extension, which won't kick in until next year or whatever, it's like there was this extreme savings for all those years that Tom Brady went to the Super Bowl, where he was like 17th in quarterback salary, with Russell Wilson going to back-to-back Super Bowls on a rookie contract, with even Cam Newton was on his rookie contract when the Panthers went to the Super Bowl and beat the Seahawks in 2015. The list goes on and on and on, where it's like, as soon as that quarterback wants to be top 5 in salary, now you're starting to cut corners everywhere else to make that happen. So for the Seahawks going into next year, I hope they're 32nd in quarterback spending. So, and it'll be like just trying to like be like, okay, now a guy comes into the situation humbly and feels like I need to do what's best for this team, and the team will do what's best for the quarterback. And moving on from the Russell Wilson situation has to be what was in the best interest for the Seahawks. I don't want to like take out, invalidate any fans' opinions out there who are like, but Russell Wilson is the best quarterback in franchise history, and it's a huge downgrade to not have him. That is 100% accurate and true. It also can be true at the same time that that team needed to move on and move into a new direction for the betterment of the future of the Seahawks. And I think that is what we are now embarking on with all these changes. So the Seahawks mission this year is, again, it's like just trying to like feel like they have positives, like, oh, okay, well, I think Charles Cross is like on a Trent Williams-y path. I think that Darrell Taylor is on a path. I think that Boy Mafe and Tariq Woolen and all these guys are going places. Ken Walker and DK Metcalf and all that kind of stuff. So it's all setting up for like a better time in 2023 and talking about, let's see our positional spending and number 5 in running back. It's like, first of all, the difference between number 5 running back and number 32 running back is $10 million. The difference between number 5, it's like nothing. It's like, this is what's so silly, where people aren't saying rational things anymore. They're not saying rational things anymore. Analytics has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with smarts of how to do something smartly. It's become solely about trashing this running back position, and that's all that they can get their minds wrapped around anymore. And that's all that their focus is intently on. It's like just about like how if any team has a running back, like, oh, the Cowboys, the only thing they can think about is Ezekiel Elliott and like how much he's being paid and they can't cut him right now. And it's like not even talking about like, oh, the Seahawks have, it's like, why would they draft Ken Walker when they have Rashad Penny and Chris Carson? Well, Chris Carson will probably not play again. And Rashad Penny is on a 1-year contract and he's barely played. What are we talking about? And we're talking about like, oh, well, this is the Kenyon Drake is the Kenyon Drake. I remember when the Raiders signed Kenyon Drake to a 2-year, $12 million contract, and it made John Gruden the stupidest man that ever lived. Yeah. A 2-year, $12 million contract. I give my kid that for school lunches. What are you talking about? Like, it's okay for a team to give $50 million a year to a quarterback, and where no one discusses, what that means, that it's $30 million more than what Matthew Stafford made last season.
Yeah.
But if you make $2 million more as a running back, that's a big deal. That's the worst. That's the stupidest thing anyone's ever done. So there's nothing rational coming out of that side of the argument anymore. They've lost touch with reality, and they're just focused on this one thing and trying to pinpoint and pick apart and get aggravated over anything that feels like, oh, a team values a running back. Yeah, I would say that maybe some teams value running back, like perhaps every team in the NFL, So any team, everybody does. The team that won the Super Bowl last year spent 2 debut picks on running backs on back-to-back years, and paid Todd Gurley. The team that they went up against in the Super Bowl has Joe Mixon in his second-round pick. It's easy for me to pull examples because it's almost every successful team. So it's like so easy to pull examples of teams that, have running backs. And, the amount of time we spend talking about Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor and Dalvin Cook and all these guys that have success is like, it's totally incongruent with the way that they're talked about in the offseason as if they were the most worthless players that have ever lived. When it's like, now I don't think that, Colts fans feel that Jonathan Taylor is worthless after he rushes for 180 yards. I don't think that Derrick Henry feels worthless to the Titans when he's the star of Monday Night Football and they're all advertising, and hey, look, come watch Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry, he's rushed for 200 yards in back-to-back games. And, and again, it's like, oh, well, the offensive lines are good or whatever. And it's like, then so does analytics, they don't pay any attention to, broken tackles, missed tackles, EPA, yards, rushing yards over expectation, plus minus, like all these things that you have reportedly developed as some sort of like analytical tool that apply to only the great running backs who consistently are drafted as in the top 3 or 4 of their position. The only difference is that they've been moved back around. Like to me, like you look at Ken Walker, he's a top 15 pick, bar none, in the 1999 draft. He's a top 15 pick in the 2014 NFL draft.
What draft was Penny taken in?
2018 when he was,
where would Walker be in that draft? I mean, Penny was a top 10 pick, right? Or top 15?
Yeah, Ken Walker and like Breece Hall would have been top 20 picks in the 2018 NFL draft.
Easily.
I mean, when you talk about Marshawn Lynch as the number 12 pick back then in 2007, and Adrian Peterson went 7th that year, it's like all those years were like Ryan Matthews was the number 12 pick. Melvin Gordon was the number 15 pick. Todd Gurley was the number 10 pick. All those years, like Breece Hall and Ken Walker, they fit right in line with that. Ken Walker is, a 5'11", 220-pound back who runs a 4.38, and he's had success in almost every game that he's ever played in. Like, I don't know what else. Like there weren't any other running backs in the draft this year that had anything near that sort of pedigree, which is why the only other running back that got drafted on day 2 was, or in the top 50 or 60, was James Cook. So it's like, and he's not even a running back; he's more of a receiving running back. So it's very like it's very it's a whole other discussion, but. The Seahawks are doing just fine, I guess, is the ultimate takeaway. Thad, anything that you would like to say, promote, do, sign off with before we go?
No, man, just, click on my stuff if y'all feel like it. At That Is Rad at Twitter. Check out my blog. Make sure to hit up Field Goals. I always post your newsletter at the top of the page per request from the boss man, Mookie Alexander. So you always are at the top there. We got the newsletter. I love that. But I think this is a fun year. I think it's going to be a fun year. I'm excited. I know some people are frustrated, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of people that are also really excited. And like you keep saying, we're ready. We're ready for. This is going to be the next couple of years are going to be getting all the pieces in place to be able to insert that quarterback, and we're in a good position. Don't be too frustrated if you're a Seahawks fan. If at this point, honestly, it could be Eason, it could be Locke, it could be Smith next year, or it could be Grayson McCall or somebody else. But I think we're in great shape. And we got a good attitude. And I love Pete Carroll. I love our draft this year, and the draft from this year makes me even more excited for the draft next year. I'm excited. It's gonna be a rough year, but we're gonna have a more consistent year. I think it's gonna be more consistent. It's just gonna be.
I hope that things fall more with your side of things, honestly, than my belief of the real. I want things to be, I want it to be like, whoa, yeah, Seahawks are off to like a 5-3 start. This is shocking, it's surprising. And I've even in my previews of the schedule, month by month, I was like, oh wow, you're picking the Broncos at the right time. You've had some success. The 49ers are kind of like always waiting to implode. They're always hoping to implode. There's ways to anything could happen. I really hope. It's funny is like. I love how many people that follow Seaside Joe have joined me on this Grayson McCall journey, because truly I think Seaside Joe is the only circle of the universe that is currently like thinking of Grayson McCall in those terms. But I believe it. That is my belief, and I hope to get other, because if Grayson McCall, if he's a first-round pick next year, we're throwing a pizza party for everybody in the state of Washington because that is so far what other people believe. It's only me and the people who are coming with me on this journey. Yeah. So if he's a first-round pick, we're celebrating. If he gets drafted, we're celebrating. If he's like in that kind of, if he has a Gardner Minshew career, we're celebrating, because it's like I believe in my McCall, and we'll see what happens there. But yeah, this is the exciting thing about Russell Wilson being traded was not that it improved the team. Now, the exciting thing about the Russell Wilson trade, if you're going to take anything, is that it improved the franchise. Yeah. It improved the way that the outlook can be for the long-term building of the team, of the roster, adding those first-round picks, adding those second-round picks. It's a multi-year process. It's a process that will require that patience, and it will pay off in exciting ways down the line. I definitely, I'm with you. I hope that the Seahawks find a way to win games and get into the wild card conversation, beat the Rams, get a couple wins against teams that you have no business beating. Exactly. They're more talented than you. It happens, it should happen. It will happen. But looking at it on paper, like months out, it's like, okay, the Seahawks are at disadvantages here, the way that we see it. And we'll see if that's the case, down the line. That's it for this episode of the Seaside Joe podcast. Thank you, Thad Wenatchee, Terrence Robinson, at Thad is Rad, for joining me once again. Thank you to everyone out there who watched. If you just joined later on in the episode, after I hit stop here, you can go back and watch the beginning and hear what we had to say about other things. This was a long 3-hour show, and we appreciate those of you who are interested in this kind of stuff. But what I said in the beginning was, I don't think that anybody needs 3 hours of video audio content from me during the off season every week, or 2 hours or 1 hour. I think that there is an oversaturation in this market of content, and I am not going to participate in it out of greed or wanting more attention or anything like that. I don't have sponsors. I will never have sponsors. I've got only the people who follow Seaside Joe. So go to the seasidejoe.substack.com newsletter, and that'll always be available. Free newsletter every single day, bonus posts, trying to get them out as regularly as possible, proving that we can talk about the Seahawks without having to make up stories. So that's it for this episode of Seaside Joe. Thank you to all the watchers, the listeners, to Thad, to Field Goals, to everybody out there. I'm Kenneth Arthur. I'll be back next time, whenever that is, either after breaking news or after, we're a little bit closer to training camp, when we'll start to find out a bit more about who might be a breakout star this year for the Seattle Seahawks, who might be starting, and what will happen at that quarterback position. That's it. I'm Kenneth Arthur. We'll see you next time.